the reality is, like, you let an athlete tell you what they believe about themselves, and then you work and hold them to that accountable belief, and they'll go and do it. But they are a new person every day they walk in the gym. And I think to remind yourself and treat them like that every day gives them the opportunity to rewrite who they are, and it gives you the opportunity to rewrite what you see in them. And suddenly they're not sat there having generated a story about themselves saying, oh, I'm shit at rowing. You know, some people have bad months, people have had bad years, right? But if you can allow an athlete to feel like they can rewrite that, then they can tell themselves whatever story they want, and then they will start to believe that they're capable of doing that.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Last Stroke Counts. Today's guest is the British rowing star performance development coach, Ben Wellburn. Ben, please welcome to the show.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We've been trying to set this one up for a while. Obviously, you're a busy man. Like we were sort of saying before, maybe not a name that everyone's heard of, but from our perspective, I think that's probably going to change.
I think a rising star on the horizon, definitely.
Well, that's the dream, isn't it? We'll find out in a couple of years if that's the case.
Yeah, we met at Hereford Cathedral School when you were over there. We started, you got us in to do the rowing machines, and I think it was pretty impressive what you've been doing what you have been doing there. I don't think it's too mean to say that previous to your appointment, there wasn't a lot going on with the rowing over there.
I mean, in 2021, just before Nat Schools, Junior Rowing News quoted us saying that we were one of the least known rowing schools in the country. And I would hope to say that has distinctly changed since 2021, I think.
Yeah, definitely. How long were you there for?
5 years.
5 years.
2018 to 2023.
So even that's pretty difficult. You know, it can take a couple of years to like get any system moving.
Yeah, I think especially the culture was a massive part. But obviously in 2018, like that was when I first started. I just left uni, so I took it on at 22. And then obviously we had COVID, and I think actually COVID was probably the best thing that happened for our setup because it allowed us to actually develop a system. And I think we probably got on the jump of COVID and in the lockdown training probably ahead of most people, and that probably kind of strangled us a lot further than what other people could.
So it just gave you a bit of space to actually sit back and be like, what are we going to do?
Yeah, I think we'd had a number of athletes that were really keen, and actually I feel like, you know, went into lockdown day one, and then day two we were doing 2 sessions a day online training. We developed this remote training system online where people could input data, and it was competitive. And then we had like a high performance group training twice a day online, and I think that really enabled us to kind of get the balance on it. And I think the kids loved it, and they got a lot of buy-in to that, and that made it really fun as well. So actually we had 100 kids trying to get involved in this, and people wanted to be part of it, which made it really fun.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. It's like, especially at school, like if they're not enjoying it, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, and they loved it, and they absolutely loved it. And we had buy-in from parents as well, because obviously parents, their kids were getting up early, so the kids were still getting up at 6:30 a.m. to come do an hour and a half online in the morning and in the evening, and actually kept them active, which I think in COVID most people were just stuck inside. And we did loads of different stuff. I mean, one of the challenges was like make a video of your training, and that allowed us to put a montage together at the end of the year. And even simple stuff like that, the amount of buy-in that kids would go, you know, we got kids going out, doing these massive long bike rides, filming it, coming home, editing it so as to keep them active. And actually the kids loved it. And it was, to be fair, for me as well, it was really fun. Actually, something really different, something I would never have thought I would have done when I first started at Hereford.
I think that's the most fun thing about finally sort of getting the reins. I think anyone who's thought about being a head coach has probably spent years in their head going like, if I was in charge, like that bit was fun, but that bit I didn't like from that. And you kind of have like got an idea of like what you would want to put in practice. I think by the time you get that position, you're like, cool. And that's the fun bit to start with. It could be stressful.
I think it was really weird going into it because I was I worked at Headington for 2 years under obviously Ryan and Chris, and that's phenomenal. I learned so much. And then as soon as I moved to Hereford, I thought, well, all that stuff at Headington works really well. I'll just try and input it. And it went down like a lead balloon, obviously. And I was so young and naive. You had you know, different culture, different environment, different type of kids, different location, different background. And then basically everything that had worked really well at Headington just fell flat at Hereford.
Yeah, you would have had to like convince the school also like why they should like spend more time and attention into rowing, like why it's worthwhile, and like what kind of like things you can achieve with these athletes.
Support from the school can be super. Like I went to in Worcester, Worcester, huge rugby school.
Yeah,
and obviously rowing happens in the first term when rugby's on. So there's just this massive clash first term and like trying to get school support and stuff. And
I think the thing is with Hereford, there was I guess the school offered the support relative to what the rowing program had been doing, which was that, the school's environments where we want to provide an opportunity for children to learn to row and take part in lots of different sports. But I came in kind of with the mentality of a high performance coach and in a high performing background. So I was like, well, I want to go and win things, and I want to be able to produce an environment where the children want to win things. And I don't think necessarily that married up, especially initially. And I think essentially, even with the kids, I remember I interviewed all the kids and said, what does Hereford Cathedral School Boat Club mean to you? One of the first things one of the kids said is, we're Hereford Cathedral School, we lose. And that was massive for me, because I'd come from Headington where literally I was like, well, they win. Like, it's just, you turn up, you win, go home. And that was sort of it. And that took so long for Headington to develop. But obviously at Hereford, it was literally the opposite. And I think that kind of shook me to the bone a little bit of actually, like, what does this mean? And then that took at least, I think, probably 2 years of developing a culture. I think obviously when you see the output, it's really easy to look at the output and not look at the process. Because I think it was probably 3 years of really, really hard graft driving that program, from the number of different coaches that we had to try and work with and develop with the athletes that we're trying to build. And then also trying to keep the school involved and interested with a lockdown. And I think that really made it like a pretty good mix. But I think also it was a bit of kind of perfect perfect moment, because we had the right kids at the right time with the right environment. I always talk about, we had a flood. This is really awful for me. I didn't know Hereford flooded when I first started. It sounds so naive, I know. But I went on a holiday on half term and got a text saying all your boats have been written off. And I think everyone thought, oh, that's devastating. But actually, I can't remember how, but basically our insurance meant it was like old for new. And we had these super lightweight boats. And you couldn't get them anymore, can you? So we were able to sort of deal with Eric Sims and Kangaroo, and they gave us a brand new fleet of boats. And I think, again, that's just offered this springboard of, well, you're coming out of lockdown, we've got these brand new boats, you've got these kids that trained really hard over a period when, arguably, I don't know what the people were doing, but maybe not as much to the standard we were doing. And that just then launched our program, I think, more than anything. So actually, all these things that potentially you could look at were bad, flood writing off all our kit, best thing to ever happen to Hereford, in my opinion. They gave us, 100 grand's worth of kit. And then through some issues with boats and Eric being fantastic, we were able to get a couple of new boats and like trading scheme. And then that got us to 150 grand, and we got these new boats. And then it kind of just, these 4 lads in 2021 dragged the rest of the club up with them. And suddenly 2 years later, Hereford had never been in an A final in that stores. And then we got every crew bar one into an A final in that stores 5 years after I started. And that's just mad.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, that's what we're talking about why people are starting to pick up on your name. Like I said, but it's a small thing. But let's get into that definitely a bit more, but rewind a little bit and just start with how you yourself got into rowing.
Yeah, so it's just before 2012 in the Olympics. Yeah. I'd love to say that I didn't see it on TV, but I must have seen an advert on TV or something, but I wasn't a sporty kid. Saw it on TV and then went down to Northampton Rowing Club. I remember doing my first session, and this woman called Imelda, I was sat in an 8, screaming at me, "You're doing it wrong. I was like, the wrong part of the slide, so uncoordinated, it was horrendous. And just loved it, like was just hooked on it. I think, that feeling on the water, I think we probably had like 1 or 2 strokes during the entire outing where like everyone moved sort of in sync relative to what you knew, and it just moved. And then I was hooked on that feeling. So just rowed out of Northampton for 3 years, had a gap year. I lied to myself and said I wanted to go and study medicine. I did not want to study medicine. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah. Took a gap year and then just trained for the year. And then ended up going to Brooks. Did 3 years there, only rowed for a little bit because I got injured. Worked at Headington for 2 years and then moved to Hereford. But I think Northampton was like the starting point, really. I think I was absolutely blessed. I was rubbish at Northampton. Like every single thing about me, I think, was not athletic. But I think I was very obsessed. I remember like we were taught power clean there, and everyone else would go home and finish doing their weights or whatnot. But I'd go and stand. There were loads of old rusty bars in the boat bay. Just go and stand and power clean for like an hour with the bar because I was so obsessed with trying to get it right. And I look and I think like I was never fit or strong, but what I was is obsessed about making it the same thing and also like making this repeatable movement. Yeah. I think I loved that movement. So I think Northampton, the coach of Northampton was very technically driven.
Attitude is everything for me. And like you were saying, but you had 4 guys drag the boat club at me. You only need one. If you got one person who really wants it and who's willing to go out of their way and chase the people who are late and give them a kick to training, like sometimes it only takes one to light that fire.
Yeah, I think that's probably not at Northampton. They kind of had that. They're all these massive guys, And I think what kind of frustrated me at the time is that I was, 63, 64 kilos at 17, 18, so I was tiny. But I was always sat in the bow seat. But whenever this massive guy came in from university, they'd shoot me out of it and then put him into the bow seat of the 8 instead. And so I was always sat there fighting to try and get an opportunity to get in the boat, even though I wasn't technically, the biggest guy or the strongest. I was just obsessed with trying to make the boat move faster than anyone else. And I always remember we had we did a lot of technical stuff static, which was great because it meant you moved the recovery really well, and we knew what shapes were in the boat and balanced really well. But we never did, in my opinion, enough work on the drive phase. I'll look back and say that now anyway. Maybe I just wasn't pushing hard enough, I don't know. But it meant that actually when this athlete would jump in a boat, I'd get kicked out. And then I'd have to work so hard to get back in it again. And luckily he was a bit flaky, so I'd get in. And that all kind of culminated when I had this gap year when I retook an A-level, stayed at Northampton and just worked my ass off and basically tried to train full time.
I think that's also like a age-old benefit of being lightweight, especially as a junior. For me, I wasn't as filled out as I am, but 6'6" or whatever, as an 18-year-old, 90, coming up 95 kilos, something like that, I can just lean on it.
Yeah.
I can get away with it. Like I can beat some of the smaller kids, but those lightweights, you have to learn how to move a boat. There's no other way to do it.
That's the thing. Obviously I'm a lot heavier now than I was then, and I can get on an ergo and lean back on it and go, I wish someone had told me how to do that, or taught me that that's a way to do it. But then I always look back and we had this seat racing once, and I remember getting in on the first race of the day, this boat moving up, and I just felt like I had put no effort in. And it sounds really stupid, but felt like I put no effort in. But we posted the score. There was the quickest the entire weekend, and then I didn't understand how. And then I'll see the next race. I was like, all right, we've got to try and match that. So I started pulling a bit harder, and then suddenly I'm going down the rankings, not up. And I'll see basically what was happening. I was just pulling harder on the handle and harder on the handle. Whereas I think what was happened the first race is I'd inadvertently suspended it and kept myself moving in a really fluid way. And I always look back at that and think no one had ever taught me that was how you meant to row. So I was just ripping it on the handle, trying to get as much power in as I could, and just going, not moving, getting worse, watching myself go down the ranking. And I'll see the further you go down the ranking, the harder you're trying to go up.
Again, this is there's two types of athlete, aren't there? There's the one who's really working them out for themselves, is a great athlete because they'll work out for themselves, and then there's another great athlete that just does exactly what they're told. And as long as they've got a good coach and they'll do exactly what they're told, I'm probably a bit more that kind of athlete. Just get myself in a good environment and just listen to everything I'm going to get taught. I was really surprised when we spoke to Tim Foster. He's obviously renowned for having incredible technique, and I was like, we're going to find out who taught this guy how to row. Yeah, because we didn't really have anyone. Yeah, just went out on the river, and I just had to work it out. And sometimes that's better as well, because you can tell someone a million times over to do something, but if they figure it out themselves in their own head.
Yeah, it's different. It's it registers in your brain differently when you come to your own conclusion, or whether you make decisions based off of feel, not because based on someone told you this is the way to row. I wanted to ask you, what was could you pinpoint the moment where you were like, okay, I really love this rowing thing, I want to take this more seriously?
I don't think there was any. I kind of feel like it was just almost this really, it sounds really dumb, but this almost awakening halfway through my gap year. I was just doing a lot of rowing. And I just love the rhythm of it. It sounds really weird, but I'd erg in no shoes, no sound, just listen to the fan, and I was obsessed with it. And that sounds really mad, but I'd sit there and I loved listening to the ergo fan.
It doesn't sound that mad to me.
So I didn't even feel like I needed music, but I could just sit on it. And then I think probably after my mum had directed me to look at Oxford Brookes and sports science, and we went to pick up a boat that Northampton had bought from Brooks, and Henry was chatting to me. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was like, I've heard about Northampton a little bit, you thought about coming here. And I think at that moment, I was still sort of lying to myself saying I wanted to do medicine. Yeah. And then looked into it, and then I was like, wow, this looks great. I remember looking, it sounds awful, I didn't even know who Oxford Brookes were. I didn't even know they did promo videos, I hadn't looked at university rowing, looked at these videos and was like, I want to be part of that. And I think that was probably if there was one turning point, it was that maybe really be I want to take it further. But I think a moment that really made me want to develop it was actually a guy called Fred Whittaker from Brooks was doing a placement year down in Silverstone, I think. Mm-hmm. And he was coming down and he sat in the 2 seat of R8 and I was sat in the bow seat and I watched him row. And just the force he was putting in, the amount of I remember being sat behind him being I didn't know you could apply that much power. He was literally shaking the boat. And then so I was just I'm just going to copy that. And then suddenly I felt this is a boat. This is what moving a boat feels like. And I think it was then that I was I want to take it further and I want to do it at Brooks, because if that's what Brooks are teaching, I want to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got an insane system, and there's just so many athletes. Like it's such a big team atmosphere. Like you just want to train, you know, because like you've got 30, 40 other guys around you. Like you're not going to be the one to stop pulling. So you turn up at Brooks after rowing at Northampton, which is a relatively small club.
Yeah.
What was that like? A bit of a shock?
Yeah, I think I won't lie, I think I was terrified at the time, actually. Like, I think I had a massive case of imposter syndrome, because when I went to Brooks, like, I didn't have a big erg, but one thing that Northampton did do was make me really strong. Like, I think I was disproportionately strong, but I was also, like, I've looked back at my erg scores recently, and, like, UT2 would literally be, like, 2 or 3 splits slower than my 30-minute pace. And I would look at them, and it'd be, like, every Monday we do 2x6, 2x8, 3x6, 30 at 20. And progressively, I would die earlier and earlier throughout these pieces, because I'd literally be going off at a 30-minute pace to do my UT2 and then wondering why I'm not getting fitter.
Yeah.
So when I got to Brooks, I was just terrified, because I was like, well, everyone was pushing really hard and I was tiny, but I was very strong. So came in on the first day, saw Henry, and I'd done a bit of preseason, which was amazing. But I mean, I was hitting 160k a week at home, and I went down for 1 day of preseason, and we did like 40k in this Cox's 4. All morning, which was like more training. Like Northampton, we go and do 12k over an entire Saturday, right? So 40k in the water, and I go to leave, and Henry knocks on my door. Oh, do you want to come do weights with the boys? And I'm like, I'm not going to turn it down. So anyway, park up, and literally I've not eaten a thing. My hands are rinsed, and go in, and I remember starting like first set of pull-ups. And Northampton, I'd never done a pull-up in my life, right? So I didn't even know what a pull-up really was. And I remember doing like, I got like 3 reps in, and I was like, I'm going to die here. And this athlete, Tom, I remember Tom literally bicep curling me up and down. And I was like, I'm putting myself up, and I know damn well I'm not lifting. Like, I'm doing as much as I can, but I'm not lifting myself up. And so that's sort of how preseason went. And then first day of actually doing it, go to the Freshers' Fair, say hi to Henry, and he's like, oh, we're doing this run in the afternoon. Everyone's got to do it. It's like the Brooks 10K or something. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Like, fine, I need to go get my kit. And it's raining loads, but I don't have any like proper waterproof kit, because it sounds stupid, but I've never had any at Northampton. Rock up in like shorts, t-shirt, ready for a run. And Henry's like, right, slowest people to the front. And I'm basically like barging my way forward, like, God, I'm not a runner. Like, I've done one run in my life. Get to the front. And then he's like, yeah, off you go. And I'm running. I'm thinking, bloody hell, like 200 meters in, we're on Cheney Lane. I'm thinking, oh, these guys are, for the slow guys, these guys are rapid. I start looking around, and it's not the slow guys. It's all like it's some inside joke or something. It's all the guys from the first day of the season before. Yeah. So you got like Jamie Copus running out the front, and I'm running next to him thinking, I've got no idea like where I'm going. But the one thing I knew is like, if I slow down, I'm not gonna be able to get to the finish line, because I don't know where the route is. Henry just like, follow someone else. And so I'm just ragging myself in the rain, like it's pouring it down with rain, and I'm literally like dying. I think I ever worked so hard ever bar that run, because I was just like, if I lose out on this, like I know that I'm not going to make it. So I'm running as hard as I can. I think I finished in like the top third or something, which is like, for me, I thought was really good, because I didn't do much running.
Yeah.
But God, it was awful. But it was incredible at the same time.
Yeah. You hear a lot of people like talk about, you know, if you want to like get stronger mentally, go to Brooks. And there you are, freshest fair, literally first day, first session, and you're already finding out what you're made of.
Well, it was literally pouring it down with rain. Like I literally halfway through the run was like trying to like run and like get out as much water. Oh. And I remember running up the hill at the very end, thinking, oh my God, this is like, I've just got to try. I remember seeing Jamie be like, I've got to try and keep up, got to try and get ahead of him. And yeah, it was horrendous, but it was fantastic, because literally like immediately then I was like, that's what you go for, isn't it? So that was amazing. And then we did a couple of ergs, and I remember one of the erg tests, I did really badly on one. It was rate cap. So like rate cap for me was not ideal because of how heavy it was, but the free rate, I remember going off at literally 44, 45. And being like, okay, like I need to settle onto a pace now. But I remember looking around, and I was on the front row looking around being like, if I'm going to slow down, like these guys are going to catch me. And I'm like, I don't think I can hold this rate. So I start taking it down to 38. And I'm like, oh God, like I'm watching my split go into the 130. So I'm like, no, I've got to keep it up. And I remember literally doing this 500 and like being like 44, 45 the entire way. And literally my hamstrings were so sore because I was putting myself out and pushing myself.
Yeah.
And get to the end, I put the handle down. And of the people on the front row, like I beat a couple of these massive guys, and I'm like, oh, thank Jesus for that. Guy was like, why did you rate so high? And I'm like, because I couldn't lose. Like I had to try and get ahead somehow, because I knew that the 1K I was bad at. Like I wasn't putting a split that was good, but the run was okay, and the 500 I think was pretty solid for what I was doing. But that was like, I remember thinking to myself halfway through this, like if I take the rate down, I'm just going to get kicked out before I even get started. And I literally picked Brooks to go and row. There was no other reason. So
that's the whole mentality that Brooks are breeding, isn't it? That whole thing of, I've done before, half hour 8:20 with the whole squad, and you're absolutely done on a Wednesday second session, but you're like, but everyone else, I can see some other screens, and I'm gonna have to keep going. You push like right through where you thought you could be, and then that's what Brooks is
known for. I think I was lucky in that, like, if I went then, like if I was that age now, the splits I was putting now, at that time I wouldn't have ever got it, because like the standard is so high now. I think I went in at 2015, so that was when like they'd done loads of stuff, but the standard was really starting to like rapidly shoot up. And I the only thing I really remember about it was like I has to say, it was really strong relative to my erg, and I think that's probably hopefully what Henry saw in me. I'd like to hope, but I don't really know. Or maybe I was a pet project because I was so light, maybe thought he needed another cog, so I don't really know. But the erg was like, I wasn't great on like the rate cap erg, but I remember we were doing weights, and I'd say like I never really bench press loads or bench pull, but I did deadlift and squat all the time. And I remember like we doing 40 seconds on or 50 seconds on, 10 seconds off, something like that, and loading up a bar, and I was just repping it out like on a trap bar, and like I'd never done a trap bar, but relative to a conventional trap bar was so much easier. I was like, my god, and it was only like 100 on the bar or 90 on the bar, and I remember repping it out, and Henry came up to me like, you don't have to kill yourself. And it was like the first time I said that, and I was like, I don't actually feel like I am killing myself right now. Like, this is like the one thing I can do, thank God. And I was like, no, I'm fine. It's like, no, really? And I'm like, no, mate, I can handle this. This is something I can do. Just don't make me run again. But that was crazy, because like that was the first time I felt like I actually could do one of the things that they wanted. But I always think like when I was there, I always like, obviously all these guys had like 95 kilos, 100 kilos. And I was literally, I remember going up to Henry one day being like, oh, Henry, I've got up to 67 kilos. Because I wasn't even hitting the lightweight weighting at that time. So I really was tiny. But yeah, it was crazy in that regard. And then obviously on the water, I remember, because obviously you only turn twice. Like they've got like a 14k stretch. Yeah. So I remember going out, Northampton's 1800. So we went out in this 4. Rode all the way down, span, rode all the way back up, span, come in. And I'm like, oh, I must be like 4 or 5k. We've done like 20, 24, something like that. And I was like, how does this go so quick? And that was, again, a massive shift. But the intensity of that was so high. And that there's one time it really, like, I felt like I could pull my weight, was in a boat there. But
I think it's interesting, we spoke to some other people, and again, myself, where having spoke to some guys who started at Leander at the same time as me. In my head, I was freaking out. I was a young kid. I was 18. I was skinny. Everyone else is better than me. Like I said, everyone's erg scores were better. Everyone was better in a single. I was always coming dead last, those kind of things. Feeling like I'm the only one that was like out my depth.
Yeah.
And you speak to everyone else and like, they were thinking the exact same thing. Like everyone's thinking, apart from maybe, some guys who've been there longer. But it's funny. I think that's the thing where, again, I look back and be like, but that's kind of what makes you. Because if you're never at your depth, then you're never chasing. But also you need to be around people that are quicker than you. Yeah. So Quentin Tarantino, I saw that. I don't think it's his quote, but he was like, don't sprint with people you can beat. Like sprint with people who are much faster than you, and you might never win, but you'll get faster. Yeah, I think that was the thing. I remember my first study at 20 there. So I came in, and after that run, actually, I got tonsillitis, bronchitis, and a chest infection all in one go. Whoa. I was so I actually ended up getting sent home from uni from the medical team. But like my first study at 20 there, I did it while being ill because I didn't want to let anyone down. And I remember like being like 3rd or 4th from the bottom of the board. And I know I was ill, but I was still looking at looking at these scores, and I was like, well, I need to be getting up there. But it was amazing to look at those scores, but also terrifying to be like, see your name, your surname nearly at the bottom, because I was like, that is not okay. Yeah. I need to be getting faster. But yeah, I was so ill, and then unfortunately got injured really quickly. I think irritatingly, I went on a night out and was on like a kid's scooter, tore a hamstring. Oof. And like that, didn't even actually know initially, because obviously you might have had a bit too much to drink. And then next day went and like saw Henry, and I was just getting that problem was I then was getting slower on an ergo, but my leg was just hurting more and more. So at the end of like a session, I'd have like a little patch of like
dark spotting on the left side of my knee. And I was like, okay, that's not normal. Went and saw a physio and he was like, oh, it's nerve pain. So like, you'll be fine. Told me to go get a prescription of some nerve blockers. My leg felt better, but I was still getting slower, but it was also hurting, just like rowing. And I remember I got moved out of sweet boats into like the ailing squad. And if you're ever in the ailing squad, you know you're in trouble. And I was about it now, like I'd barely done any swimming ever. And I was steering it. And I was like steering it obviously in my like left foot steering foot. And that's the hamstring I torn and I hadn't realised. And every time I was trying to steer and put power down, it was hurting more and more. And then 1 30-minute test just went. And like I couldn't walk, literally couldn't walk, had to call a taxi home. Went and had an ultrasound and they're like, yeah, you've done a 95% tear on your bicep femoris. And I was like, oh shit, like this is bad. And literally spent the next year out.
Surgery?
No, like, but it's very conservative. Yeah. So I was like not even able to do, I couldn't exercise for nearly a year. Wow. I had to go and see physio 3 times a week. I had a physio in Northampton, so drove, it's only an hour between Oxford and Northampton, drove there 3 times a week. But I'd gone to Brooks to row, and literally by the end of the October, I was out of rowing. And so I was like, didn't really know what to make of myself. And obviously at this point, I didn't really know, like I had this physio in Oxford that had been like, it's nerve pain. So seeing him, and it took a couple of months after that, and having had that scan to actually be like, right, what's the recovery look like? And then obviously I just immediately set goal for next year. And then was doing a Nordic hamstring curl like 9 months on and tore it again. And so like 2 months before going back in, had torn it again. So not fully, not as bad that time, but I'd been rehabbing, jumped into this pair, and we're just doing like trying to get this project up and running, just to like get me back in. Did a race, St. Neots Regatta of all places, and I've been having a bit of rib pain, and like just something happened, like something, in fact, it was a massive pop. Turns out I torn an external oblique on race, and like I'd been doing it on a bike, so cycling home. And just like went off the traffic light really hard, felt it go, and was like, oh, I must be fine. Like had a scan and they were like, yeah, it's not ideal. Went to a race and it really went. And then after that, it was like this downward spiral of like hamstring twice, external oblique, and then tore my hip labrum because I was still trying to row.
Because when you're pushing, you're trying to overcompensate, yeah.
So it's just like this exciting downward spiral of like.
So was that kind of what made you think about getting into coaching, or had you done a bit of that before at Northampton, or?
No, like honestly, I have no idea. I think like after getting dropped from rowing at Brooks because I was injured, I felt like I wasn't part of like a team, which was really weird because I went to Brooks to row and then felt like an outsider. And that's nothing that anyone else at them had done. I think that's the pressure I put on myself. Like if I wasn't rowing, I wasn't part of the team.
Yeah.
And then there's this woman that I was on my course with that was working at Headington, and it was like one of these things. I was doing it like this proper days. She was just like, oh, well, like, just apply it, like, it might be fun. So I applied and they got an interview. And then I remember on the interview, like this, again, it sounds so bad. I was so naive, didn't even know Headington were any good at rowing at the time. Like, I hadn't really looked into them. And then I Googled them. It was like, oh, I won the Peabody Cup like 9 times. And I was like, I don't know what the Peabody Cup is. And then literally going into interview, Ryan's like, well, do you know who we are? And I'm like, yeah, you've won the Peabody Cup. I don't know what that is. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And it's like, oh, have you done much sculling? I'm like, yeah, loads of sculling, right? I'm on it. And then, like, by some miracle, get the job. And I loved it. Right? But I remember Ryan showing me some footage, being like, what would you say is a problem with this athlete? Like, what they're doing wrong? And I'm looking at it, I'm like, it's pretty tidy to me. And I can't remember what I say, but, I think I might have said, like, she was wearing feet out. And we'd never done feet out at Northampton. And I was like, oh, Ryan, she's got a feet out. That's a big problem. I look at it now and go, what was I doing? And he was like, no, I look at her hands. And I'm like, I don't know. So like, it was something like left-hand lead. I didn't even know. But like, I think kind of what we talked about earlier about like understanding the fundamentals of rowing. Like I could look at a boat and be like, well, I know what you need to do to push. But I didn't know like the finesse of that. And I was so embarrassed. But it was absolutely incredible to be there at Headington. But I felt like, but a bit out of depth.
But again, out of depth. And then, okay, shit, like, time to learn now.
Yeah,
like,
and that was incredible.
Down. And like you said, like that's what you were good at, sitting out after a session and just going over it, and like banging your head against a brick wall, which that's for a long... I've just developed this method of just finding my own way to do something and just sort of bang my head against a brick wall to do it. And then when it's with like tech stuff, he'll like be watching me doing invoices like, what the f*** are you doing? Like, why are you entering everything manually into a spreadsheet? Do you know you can just and then he just
system.
Download a CBS file and just drop it in like 4 seconds?
You're literally doing it with like a monocle and a pen, like
because it's just like because it just bash your way to
Yeah.
the front sort of thing. But I find it interesting as well, like why people or how some people get drawn to coaching as opposed to rowing. Like some people like row and they love rowing and that's enough, and then some people kind of feel the draw. But they said you kind of almost fell into it.
You
Yeah.
wanted to be involved with the sport even though you were injured, basically.
Yeah, I think so. I think like I think I put a lot of myself onto like being a rower. So I think a lot of my identity at that time was being a rower. And so therefore when I lost rowing, I think I felt like I lost my identity. And then to be able to find like a bit of coaching and to be around it again and feel like I was part of something, and that's what Headington was fantastic about. I felt like part of the team. Then I was like, well, I'm back doing sort of what I love doing. And then actually it was just like, you're just teaching it. So I was like the J14 second coach, the assistant coach. It was fantastic. And then was just really driven to try and make that as good as I could. And I think that's sort of where I was like, again, that kind of obsessive nature. Like I would make session plans for every single individual athlete and then write feedback on every single athlete after each session, and would go home and do that for like 4 hours a day.
I thought you were bad at admin.
Oh, wow. Talk to my bosses about that. You'll find out. I think it depends on what. Like, I think with regard to that, like I always remember like I'd get to Headington, like sessions started at 8, I'd get there at 7:15. There were 9 motor launches. I'd get all the like the fuel out, get all the kit out to make that ready. Because I think I took a lot of my personality on being like a hardest worker in the room, and certainly not say there's a hardest worker at Headington. I think everyone does their own things, but I knew that that's something that I could do, and I knew I was working really hard to put like, you know, Ryan and Chris like into a position where it just made their life 10% easier, which I felt then would give me a better standing. And I think I was always trying to look to be told I was doing a good job, which is, I look back now and I know I didn't need to, but I wanted to do that. But I also wanted to put my athletes in a position where they could perform the best. And because, you know, it was my athletes, therefore it was my squad, therefore my club. So I wanted to think, well, if I'm everyone's athletes in a better place, we'll all go faster. So get there early and then have this like real detailed plan of like, you know, as soon as I was given, you know, we split the octos, so I had to be octo. As soon as I'd given my crew, I felt like then we just hit the ground running. And I think probably it was at that point when we talk about like if there's a moment as an athlete, I don't think I had that as much as a coach. When I was given my own crew, I then feel like I took off, and I knew exactly what I wanted from them. I felt like I knew how we needed to get to where we needed to be. And the culture and environment of that octo, I think, was still incredible. Like I look back now and I still think like, so we won Nat schools, and I remember what, I'm not going to say who, but a coach being like, oh, if you get to a semi-final, you've done really well with those girls. And we won. And I just remember being like watching it, and it was, I still think probably the hardest race I've ever watched, because I remember like, I always think like J14 rowing's basically like who can row the entire kilometre and who can catch the least amount of crabs. But we definitely knew like we weren't the biggest, strongest, fittest girls. So we just played on that fact, and we were like, right, well, can we have better blade work? Can we row better than everyone? And can we have an entire kilometre focusing on that? And then I remember like in the final, like catch crab, we're ahead and we catch crab, then we're half length down that, and then catch crab and, you know, get ahead again. And it was like that until 800 metres. And at 800 metres in, just that's where like that little bit of extra prep just came through, and we'd shot past. And in all three, you know, in the semi-final, the same thing happened. We hit 800 metres and then we were suddenly half length up. And in the final, the same thing happened. I remember watching that and just being like, those girls had put in so much to make that happen. And to be able to just watch them and be part of that was incredible. And I think I was like, probably, I know I've done like helped at Hereford, but like, that was one of those moments where I was like, yeah, that's what it's about.
Mate, that's awesome. That's absolutely fantastic. That kind of affiliation that like you feel when you've got a crew that you're coaching, like that just really hits home. Like when I think back, like when I was coaching with Tom and, you know, just bringing up all the novices to row. And then it's kind of similar J14 and like the novice rowing at Oxford College rowing, I'd say. It's a similar standard because you're literally just bringing people up just right from scratch. And then again, who can catch the least crabs? Can they have fun? Can we focus on rowing technically well? That kind of thing. Like, it makes me happy on the inside.
Yeah,
it's really good, I think, as well for like, you know, reassessing. Like especially if you sort of ended up rowing at a high level and you've just been like, you know, obsessing of, is it 4 or 5 frames on the catch, and then all of a sudden you're teaching someone to row from scratch, and you really need to kind of like go over it in your head. I think you become a better rower and coach, obviously, by having to go back there and being like, or like seeing, oh, there's something wrong with that boat. Like oh, I remember what we used to get told at school 6 years ago. So it kind of like brings it all back to the front. So
I think that's what I felt like was a bit of almost like the gift, is that I think rowing and coaching at Headington kind of allowed me to redevelop who I was a bit, and I was still able to be involved in rowing, but I just felt like I wasn't necessarily doing. I often think there's a lot of rowing that's like, well, my granddad taught me that, so I do that, and you know, their great granddad did that, and suddenly you're looking at rowing from like 2,000 years ago, and you're like, yeah, but we're still doing the same stuff, right? And I don't feel like that was something that I did a lot of, which I think really allowed me, because I didn't know much as a coach, because I didn't know what like I wanted, but I could look at a boat and almost like empathize with like where I felt like the power was going and what that looked like in person and in the hull. And so then that meant that like from that we could just almost develop my own thing to enable the boat to go fast. And the athlete buy-in was just so high that I feel like what you're saying about like their involvement and their joy for it made that like such like a core mission. And one thing I always think is like, I definitely think I'm not the most exciting coach. Like I think I'm probably pretty strict and like direct in like what we need to do to go fast. But at the same time, I think I weighted a lot of like the mission, the group, like we are a bundle of collective people working for each other, that actually then allowed us to model something really special and then get that enjoyment and development. But I do also think that like falling out of rowing then allowed me to look at it and be like, right, well, what does a boat need to look like? And I'd not, as I say, I'd never really done any sculling. I'd only ever done sweep rowing. And so I was just like, well, does the same apply? You know, I think
to a degree, yeah.
I think back then everyone was always like, yeah, but sculling requires a lot more finesse. And I think that, you know, those stereotypes, and maybe it did, maybe it still does, I don't know. But the reality is like, I don't look at like an Olympic women's eight and say, well, they're less technically proficient than an Olympic women's quad. Like that's just not the case. So there's the finesse, but in different ways, and power application in different ways. And I often wonder if like, just because I had to row, like I was rowing as a lightweight and I didn't have weight behind the handle, I was then able to apply principles of what I felt was, I guess, more actually not slowing the boat down on the recovery than actually accelerating a boat on the drive.
Yeah, I think you found yourself in a position where you could, try out new things.
Yeah.
Think about what could actually make the boat go faster, because he didn't come into coaching with like all these preconceived notions of like, this is what rowing needs to be like. Again, that finesse, or this is how sculling is. It's like, okay, no, let's figure it out. Okay, does this make the boat go faster? Cool, let's continue doing this.
Yeah.
And another thing, what you said, like, you might not be the most friendly coach, but that's the thing. You're not supposed to be their friend. You're supposed to be looking out for them, and sometimes that just means being strict, you know?
The very first thing I remember, the coaches that worked there at the time, one of my first sessions at Headington, pulled all the seniors together. And I remember saying this, and it still bites me ass to this day, anytime I see any of the Hereford athletes, is I stood there in front of all the athletes and said, listen, we're coaches, we're friendly, not friends. And anyone that is listening to this that is from Hereford will remember I said that all the time, because it was so much like, yeah, like, you know, we are going to try and develop you and help you, but at the end of the day, we're not your friend. Like, you know, you can come to us and we'll support you, but we're still members of staff. We're still, you know, we have a role, you have a role. It's still a professional environment. And although you're working with kids, I think actually sometimes, you know, if you're, like I was 19 when I was working at Headington, you know, I was 22 working at Hereford. And when you're working with 18-year-olds, I think that can be really, really dangerous to blur those boundaries.
Yeah, kids are a lot more switched on, what we also give them credit for. Like, they understand. You can say things like that to them, and they will just get on board. But if you let them know that exactly they can like mess with the boundary, in for a treat or trouble.
Yeah, I think that was it. I think I was very clear on boundaries. I often look back now and wonder if it was too much so. But I think obviously you never know, and it worked at the time. Like, it worked to develop what we needed.
I think the thing about it is some people can like you said, be friends, but then when it's time to be serious. Then other kids can't, and it's just, you don't want to get to that position where we used to, our own coach at school used to say he also did he did these like summer expeditions. You know, he used to do like school expedition and some travel, and a couple of the rowers went on that expedition, and he really didn't like it, because then for the next rowing year, he was like, they know a bit too much about me. You know, they've seen me annoyed, they've seen me, and they're like, I want to keep that kind of like separation. But yeah, ultimately, like I said, like being tough, it's like, as long as everyone in that environment understands that everything that's being done is to maximize potential, at that point, like, it doesn't even feel strict. It's like, cool, okay, Ben says we need to do this, we need to do this. I think like, if you've got that environment set up and you've got those people who want to achieve whatever, you know, and trust in the program, of course.
Yeah.
That comes over time.
I think that's what I kind of noticed at Headington was that it was more than anything was trying to take pride in what we did. So it was real simple things like we had a couple of Oxford colleges boating out across at the same time. It was like we were like, right, let's always boat earlier than them. It sounds really silly. We were like, they're Oxford people, they'd be on it, but let's boat earlier than them because we're more on it than them. Or let's wash our boat better, let's tidy our kit away better.
Yeah.
And I think things like that, actually people want like that. That's buy-in, but it's not performance. That's just being better people. I think one thing that we talked to Hereford a lot is like good people make good athletes, make great rowers. And so actually if you work at the base, which is just make good people, suddenly actually like if you can put your kit away properly and you can tidy up and you can be organized, you can be kind, you can be helpful, you can say your please and thank yous, you're going to make the environment a lot better because you don't have that arsehole in the room that's like throwing their weight around or bitching and slagging someone off in the changing room. Everyone's got their own back and everyone's got each other's back, and that suddenly you go, well, now I'm in a group of people where I trust that they're going to do for me what I would do for them.
Absolutely. And you don't need any talent to put away kit properly or to turn up a little bit early. And that's what Morgan, Bain and Williams spoke about when we had her on the podcast.
Yeah, they talk about in the GB squad, no talent required stuff. Yeah, which is like really interesting. Like all that stuff around the outside, and I like sort of having an athlete who's really getting into it and comes to what else can I do? What else can I do?
Yeah.
What else can I do? Like how else can I row better? And I can be like, I can give you like 15 things. It's nothing to do with rowing. Get more sleep, eat properly, make sure you're stretching, drink a lot of water, always have your water bottle with you. Like there's a million other things that you can do that will help your performance that actually have nothing to do with what you're doing on the water.
Yeah, I think obviously you have that, the higher level you get, the skill gap closes and closes and closes. And so then you are having to look at the things around rowing. Is that like your mental state, your emotional state? What are you doing to enable you to be a better athlete? Is it okay? Well, like I talk to my athletes a lot about like, they're now, I work with uni students mostly. So I want them to go on a night out because they're still university students. I don't think they shouldn't. But what I want them to do is actually be prepped. So if you have got a session at 7 a.m. and you're going to go out, okay, it's not ideal, but I'm not going to say no. You need to develop a life and have a fun life as well. But maybe just put a bottle of water next to your bed, just so you're a little bit less hungover or you're a little bit more switched on for the next day. Pack your bag before you go out so that it's one less thing to stress you out. So you're not rocking up 10 minutes late. And I think it's about trying to enable you to have that good life around the thing you're trying to do really well at, but also then find those little details that might make you that little bit better. But I think one thing that'd be really easy to do is like to remove all of those fun things, actually like become like a monk or a nun, like don't go out, don't watch TV, turn your phone off 4 hours before. But suddenly you're really saying to the athlete, well, don't switch off, don't contact your family, don't contact your friends, don't go and have fun, don't enjoy life, just row. And actually really we know happy athletes make fast athletes.
Yeah, I don't think that gets spoken about enough.
It's got really serious really quick. And I remember even when I was at school, so I left in 07, still like 06, 07, I remember the coach being like, we're training, we're doing weights Monday lunchtime, Monday after school, Tuesday lunchtime, Tuesday after school, a double on Wednesday. I think we used to have Thursday off. Friday we do like lunchtime, double on Saturday. And you're like, this is a lot. I'm 16. This is pretty crazy. It's difficult because everyone else is putting that work in. But I agree with you, like if you want long-term success. And I think that's another thing we've spoke to other people about when you're coaching at a school. You've got these athletes for 3 or 4 years. Are you coaching to make them win in 3 or 4 years? Or are you coaching them to have like a long, successful career? And like there's kind of two different ways to play it. Probably a bit of both. But I think it's, again, like we were a lot more around the circuit. We were a few more events last year. And there's a lot of people just keep talking about like, let's have a bit more fun with it. Like we could do an event that's a bit more fun or some erg challenge, or we could have a DJ at the end of the course and, a beer tent and like all sorts of different things, but the just general sense of like, it's amazing the standard that rowing's got to like school and university level, but like how long are people capable of doing it?
Yeah.
Because how fun is it to do?
The thing is, I think a lot about, and I certainly know myself, like, and I suppose I'll talk about it later, but like at Hereford, I know I was too serious to start, even probably toward the end. And I look, even now, 6 months on, I look back and think, I could have done that a bit better, a bit more fun. But at the same time, as you say, like, you've got these athletes who are potentially training virtually full time, like doing 2 sessions a day from 16, 17. But actually at the moment, we know that the average age of Olympians like 28 to 32. So you say, right, okay, so you're going to do this for 16 years. 16 years of training twice a day, and then we're going to make it really boring at 16. I'd love to know the rate of dropout, drop off, things like that. And actually, there are simple things to make it more fun. We did some simple stuff, or even like super stuff, like turn all the lights off, and then like you can backlight the screens on the power curve, and they put like DJ music on, and the kids loved that. And that was only like one session, but like for the rest of the week they were hyped up. Mark Wiggleston at Windsor Boys does loads of amazing stuff that makes it really fun. Even like they do like in-house ergo competitions where they get like smoke machines and fog lights and like DJ lights, and I think that's the stuff that gets people involved.
Yeah.
But also I think rowing is very, it is very monotonous, but trying to make it different is part of the game. And I think that's where you can look at like the constraints of it, isn't it? But I think that's probably where things like when you see these programs do really well, the culture environment is probably what's making it really good. Like I believe most people aren't doing things different. It's the way they're doing it and the way that the people are interacting with it. Brooks has an incredible culture, and that culture is so supportive because the challenge is so high, which means that they have a lot of fun outside of that. But when you pick up an air candle, you're going to try and rip your legs off. But as soon as you put it down, you're back in the room with your mates. And I think that's how most places make it fun now. And I think that, I think what's happened with rowing is you've now got really two avenues, haven't you? Got like high performance or completely recreational.
Yeah.
There's not this where you can be performance and have fun.
Yeah.
And I'm sure other centres, like other places do that. And I'm sure people listening are like, oh no, you got that wrong. But rowing is for the majority bloody boring. And I think that's like, you can hide that from an athlete, or you can make that really obvious and be like, listen, this is boring, but we're going to do it for this reason. So let's make the most of it, but let's try and have fun where we can on the periphery and around that. And I think that's something that working with adults now and uni students, I'm trying to do more of. I think with kids, that was really hard, especially in Hereford. It's really hard to try and find that line of like, okay, well, what's fun, but we want to perform. And maybe that's because the culture and the size of the squad wasn't big enough, or we hadn't developed that enough, and I wasn't good enough at doing it. I don't know. I think, my obsessive nature of doing things a certain way, like that barbell, I would literally go and power clean for like an hour every night just to get it right. I think I was the same in coaching. I think I am the same in coaching. Like if you're doing a roll up and you're doing it wrong, we'll stay out there until you got it right. And that's, I have to really taper that, because I think that's not fun for the athlete.
Yeah.
But at times that's necessary as well. And I think it's about being careful to make sure that the athlete's getting the good experience, but at the same time they're getting what they need out of it.
Yeah, I think it's also difficult to do everything all at once. Like you look at Brooks and be like, oh, it's insane, look what they're doing. Like, yeah, but like Henry's been there since like 05, something like that, And it's like, you're going to go to Hereford and you're going to try and set up all these other things. You've got a process, a squad, a way of doing things. Like it's difficult to also be like, and we'll do this, and we'll do this, and we'll do this. So there was going to be kind of an order at some point to doing things. I
think that's exactly it. Like I talk about legacy enormous amount, and Hereford we actually named not one but two boats legacy, and so for us when we started at that first high performance J16 quad, it was all about building a legacy that's like bigger than you. Like what are you going to look back at? Got really been going by, what's the legacy going to be for people that are like your siblings or people that look to you in the future. And when we had it was in lockdown. And so we had all that online training, and all of that was about like being the best you can be so that people look to you in the future. And that really developed this amazing culture. But one thing I noticed when I look back is that like obviously like the fire starters, the people you work with at the very beginning, your trailblazers, as that develops and you take on more people, that relationship that you had with them has obviously ultimately changed a lot. And I look back and I look at those four athletes now and go, okay, well, how good of a relationship do I have with them now? I'd argue probably not as good as I did in 2021, because actually Hereford as a whole developed, which meant that the environment and the attitude and the culture changed with those athletes as well as everyone else. Whereas originally there was four people and me. Yeah. I'd had a hip operation, and 2 weeks after a hip operation, I drove 120 miles to go and watch them do a 30-minute test, and I couldn't walk. And I did that because I felt that was really important for me to see them and them to see me still. And I look and I go, well, that was when I had four athletes, but then when we had 40 people aiming to go to Nat schools, those four kids will probably felt like there was a lot less support, and the challenge was greater to keep that going. And I think, as you say, like you can't develop it all at once, but I certainly think that's one thing I notice now, is that actually like you have to be careful when you're developing that relationship with those first people. Yeah. And you see it in other environments too.
I'd say it's the difference between, when most people start out coaching, they might get given a boat, a lower boat, and you're like, cool, it's me and this boat. And then you're like, I love this. I love coaching. I love seeing them improve. I love being able to like impart my knowledge. or when I finished rowing, like I didn't think I was going to coach, but then I was like, geez, like I've spent 10 years trying to be the best in the world at this. There's like a lot of stuff up here.
Yeah.
I'm never going to use it again. You have an ability to do that. I think I really like this. I'm going to progress, become women's assistant coach, women's head coach, and head coach of everyone. You know, well, now I'm looking after like 60, 70 athletes.
Yeah.
I can't, it's a very different job.
Yeah.
And it's very stressful, but then ultimately, like, that's how we progress.
And that's what you do it for, though, isn't it? Like, I think, you know, we all want to see people win, but what we really want to do is make sure that everyone's trying to win. And the entire group that you're doing, you want to see them, and whether winning is like winning the gold medal or just getting a better 2K time than they did 3 months ago. And like, I was lucky in Hereford in that we'd had these, like in J14, we made it much more competitive, and that kind of tracked into J15, 16. And then when we came out of lockdown, selfishly, I made a decision to prioritize this one quad of J16 lads, and then gave basically the rest of the boat club to the 3 other coaches and said, listen, we need to do something that people want to follow. I think it can be these 4 boys. And the other coaches were on board and said, yeah, fine, we agree with that. Like, you look after these 4 and we'll look after everyone else. And I still had a lot of involvement with the other age groups, but obviously the other people in the senior squad, it weren't high performance, but they still wanted to row. I had some input, but more directional, not actual direct, like hands-on coaching. But it meant that this J16 quad, we could put a lot of effort and time into, of just basically just me doing that. And again, lockdown was sort of perfect because like we weren't going to any events. It was just training all the time. So it was just me and these 4 lads in this launch. And, you know, then we developed that, and that choice then, you know, progressed into them getting some good results. And that meant the next year we had like 70 year 9s once join, and we had a boat club that had gone from 40 kids to 120. And that was like a 5th of the school.
You basically just created belief. Like, you've created belief that Hereford isn't the place that you don't go to Regatta and lose anymore. You're like, oh, yeah, like, no, we won.
And
like,
I think
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That was the difference. I think it's like, we talked about that legacy a lot. And then obviously, like, I often tell people this story, like, when we went to Nat Schools, I didn't know how quick we were. Like, I'd won a Nat Schools gold with the girls beat Octo, but I had no idea about boys rowing. I know we had some all right ergos. Like, we had a 6:35 and a 6:87, and I was like, well, that's pretty good. But at the same time, he had like a 7 minute 7:10, which is good for a normal J16. But I had no idea if that was enough to win that schools. And then I remember we did the time trial, and someone came up to me and said, oh, you're out by 11 seconds. And I was like, shit, we can't be that slow. And then my mum called me and was like, oh my God, have you seen the results? Your time trial, you're 11 seconds ahead. And I was like, oh my God, like, no way. And I was literally stood there like, this cannot be happening. And then, so, like, final comes in, and like, if you watch the video on YouTube, you can't see our crew on the video for half of it because we're so far ahead.
Wow.
And then Caddy, who's now at Brown in the race, took the rate down to 26 because he was like, I didn't want to screw it up. So we got out far enough ahead, and they was like, took it down and just like not paddled it, but like firm pressure rate 26, just so they didn't cock it up. Yeah. And it's funny because the entirety of that video is them talking about like 2nd, 6th, and you forget they're almost we're ahead. And then at the end it says, oh, like one of the crews trying to catch up to Hereford, and Caddy got a thought, and they weren't even going to catch us. So we were just like, we got so far ahead, we weren't going to race it. Come on. And I remember cycling along that, and I think at like 1800, and like as a coach, you never want to like jinx it. I remember at 1800 meters being like, okay, like, surely we can't lose, touch wood, surely we can't lose this race now. And I remember calling my mum like 2 minutes before, like, are you watching this video? This is bloody mental, mum. And it was amazing. And I think from that, you know, then we had GB France and Brit Champs, and then like we qualified the crew for Henley, which was just incredible because obviously full J16 crew at Henley. And bless them, I kind of think they probably shit the bed a bit at Henley. And I think they probably could have done a day or two. We lost out to George Watson by half a canvas. But the entire school was watching that. And I think that was such a turning point. Yeah. Is that like we'd had this crew that had gone from like, as I say, no one had got an A final in that schools to win that by 11 seconds. Win Brit Champs, win the GB France, although it wasn't GB France, the racing, because obviously we couldn't race France. Yeah. But we won like the trial event, they turned it into regatta, and then to qualify for Henley. Yeah. And all with like these year 11 boys that just walking around school, and it's like little old Hereford. I know it sounds really stupid, but like I'm a firm believer, like if you go to Hereford, I think it's a bit like it's a magical place. If I was explaining it, it's a bit like Narnia, like you don't know what it is until you get there. Yeah. And then you meet these people with this culture and you're like, oh my God, like you could build something here. Yeah. And that just transformed, in my opinion, that transformed probably the future of what that looked like for everyone.
That's amazing to hear that journey, and like a bit like, you know, it's a risk and a commitment to be like, I'm going to put everything into these 4 people.
Yeah.
But to see, like, from your perspective, to see how that could play out, to see it play out was really good. So in terms of like going to Hereford, like what were the things that, say, you liked about rowing that you knew you wanted to take there, or the things that you hated about it that you didn't? Or was that a conscious choice with the legacy thing, or did that just kind of appear in front of you as a direction to go?
I don't know. So like, I think interestingly, like, I guess I learn more when I'm with coaches. I learn more about what I don't want than I do want, and I don't necessarily think that's really productive and intentional. But I think you pick on things, don't you? And as coaches, we're inherently more negative than positive. So I think at Headington, like, they had this incredible technical model. Ryan and Chris were absolutely incredible. Although I say that at the time, and Chris, I love you now, but like at the time, at 19 years old, I didn't really know what Chris did. And so Chris would rock up and like do stuff, but I never spent any time with him. But obviously, like, Ryan is sort of like, you know, he was coaching the first boat, but I'd be like, well, what's Chris up to? And when I became a head coach or head of rowing, I was like, oh my God, now I get what Chris does. Yeah. And like, Chris is like the backbone to it all. Well, I look back and think so naively that I didn't know what Chris was doing. But like, Chris like holds the program up on his shoulders. And don't get me wrong, like, Ryan's a wizard as well. But Chris is like the admin logistic monster, as well as being a phenomenal coach.
I've seen some of their spreadsheets. It's incredible.
Like, and Ryan is a wizard at Excel, right? But like, the way the two of them work together, I think is out of this world. And I think I took a lot of that when I left to go to Hereford, is that like Ryan's enthusiasm and engagement with athletes, like the buy-in he gets and how kind he could be, but also be so driven. I think I took that knowing I wanted to do that, but I think I also, I hate time wasting. Like, have a thing, you ask any athlete I've ever worked with, I have stopwatch on me the entire time. Like, I time everything. Like, if we're getting on the water, I time it. And at Hereford, we only were on the water from 4 till 5:30. And like, I pushed the boundaries on that, but it was always like, you've got to be gone. So if we're taking 20 minutes to get on the water, that's too long for me. Yeah. Like, so took the like time efficiency, and I think when you're a program where it has time, you just use time. Yeah. And I know that we do that at the moment in Nottingham. We're a little bit lazy with time management. So I knew at Headington, I was like, okay, I think we could be more time efficient. Like, we shouldn't be boating at 8:50 if we're arriving at 8. And so I wanted to change that. And I think, you know, the technical model that Ryan and Chris had developed, that was really strong. I loved that, and I really understood and got to grips with that. The weightlifting that they did was phenomenal. Had a guy called Barry John Mulder, which was really good, and he was the S&C, and they led that, and it was incredible. And the amount of interaction between strength and conditioning and rowing, I thought that was incredible. Like, I hadn't seen that, and that sounds really silly, but like at Northampton, Brian, my coach, coached us. At Brooks, everyone already knew how to do it, so I hadn't seen that you could get someone in to do that. And I wanted to do that at Hereford, but found out and didn't have any bloody money for that, so that was a bit of a turn. But I think the valuing of it, and I say, like, we had that J40 Octa, and the buy into that was something I wanted to take in. And so I think legacy kind of came from where it, like, I've read a load of books, and obviously Legacy by Tom Kerr's massive. Everyone in rowing should read that, and if they haven't, do so. And if they have, you know what I mean. But the legacy wasn't just that book; it was more about, like, so one of our athletes, MJ, his granddad had rowed for Hereford in like 1920, and MJ was like, I'm following my granddad's footsteps. Wow. And so just that, like, developing that legacy, and I think it was just something to get buy-in. And I just think, like, any club logo that I wear, I buy into it so much. Yeah. Like, it'd be like, literally, like I said, like, I'd bleed blue and gold for Hereford. Like, even now, I always do it. Even at Headington, if Ryan ever needed something, I'll like, yeah, fine, I'll be there in 2 hours. Yeah. Well, I haven't also 20 minutes, right? But but like, I'll always like commit to that. And so I think we wanted that. And so I talked a lot about, like, the badge at Hereford. Like, I didn't go to that school, and the boat club wasn't on site. So I was used to say to kids, like, the club, like, the logo you're wearing is not the school logo. That's a boat club logo. That's something that we've developed. And when we went in, we changed kit supplier to, like, Meduno, who were the best at the time. We'd got all these amazing boats. The blades we'd redone. So they'd had this, like, horrible blue with a yellow stripe. I'm sure the old people loved it, but I hated it. So I wanted to redesign what the club looked like and felt like, so that you were proud of it. So we developed kit that I think at the time was a bit forward thinking. Like, it was only like sublimated and like had like watermarked, but no one was really doing that. We had logo on the blades, which was different. It wasn't painted. It looked a bit more like the US blades. Mm-hmm. And that, to generate buy-in, was really key.
Yeah, you certainly don't leave a legacy by following the set out path. You have to be trying new things. And in order to try new things, some of them will work, some of them will fail, but you have to be taking massive risks. And it sounds exactly that's what you've done. But like, who would you say was like the biggest inspiration behind like this sort of like approach, or were you just like, you know, looking at things with a sober look and thinking, okay, I want to try this, I want to try that, why not? You know?
Yeah, you know what? There's actually one guy immediately who said like, who's your person? A guy called David Connington. And I remember, so David came in, he's a biology technician of all things, right? And he came in a year into me being at Hereford before the lockdown, so in 2020, beginning of it in September. And he'd come down and helped out at like we had no nitric acid, all the old Herefordians raced us. He was on the finish line just helping out. And I went for a coffee with him in like the September, October, and was just like talking to him about like rowing and stuff. And like he'd done a bit of coaching, he'd been at Emmanuel. And he turned around out of nowhere and was just like, listen, like, I think you're pretty harsh to the athletes. Like, you're pretty rude. Like, you're really negative. And I sat there and I was like, shit, like, this is taking me back loads. So I thought I was like arrogant twat. I thought I was really good at coaching at that point. And I got sound so naive and stupid now, I know. And then, yeah, so I worked with David a little bit. And then, like, after like 6 months, I was like, I'm just going to Google him, like, to see what he's done. And when I say, like, he's done everything, like, he's coached, like Gabriel Oppos, or like when he was like manning J15, he'd I think it was Partridge or Campbell, I can't remember who. He taught Henry Bayless Webb in Brooks. Yeah. He taught Steve Trapmore. Like Steve Trapmore, like says a lot about how good David was. And David's brother was president of Oxford Boat Club. And David had done everything. Like you name it, he'd done it. He'd coached to a high level. He'd done Henley. He'd won that scores medals more times than I'm probably ever going to go. Like, he'd done everything. And it's just this biology technician working part-time at Hereford. And, like, that was, like, a game changer. Because I kept on going to David being like, listen, I've got this really stupid idea. What do you think? And if anyone that knows me will say this, like, I'm great with the ideas, but I'm shit at finishing them. And so, like, I'd go to David and be like, I want to redo all the blades. And he's like, no, man, don't do it. And I'm like, fantastic. We've got someone who can come and strip them and paint them for us. I want all these logos on it. And he's like, no, don't do it, because we're going to have to do 100 blades. I'm like, that'll be fine, David. And so David basically meant that I'd start off with this great idea. I'd do 2 blades. David would be left with 98, right? and David, I think, just was such a soundboard for anything I thought. And he'd just be like, well, what's the worst that can happen? And like, he'd just be like, well, you're not winning things at the moment. So if you try it, what's the worst that happens? You lose? Because you're already there. And he was always so positive. And I mean, like, incredibly positive. And I think it sounds really bad, but he came in as this, like, you know, wispy head, 55-year-old guy doing biology tech. Like, he's not some big, like, in-your-face kind of guy, quiet, laid back, doesn't talk loads unless you speak to him. And then he's got this mountain of knowledge, 40 years of, you name it, he's done it. Yeah. And I think I would genuinely credit my entire career on David. Like, genuinely everything about, like, what I've done, like, he was, like, my backbone to it. Because I think I'd applied for a job at Cambridge Blue Boat and not got it, but I was looking at quitting rowing coaching. And then in my second year at Hereford, met David, and that turned it all around. So I think generally, yes, all David.
That's incredible. Like sometimes,
go on.
Sometimes it just, you know, it takes perspective from someone who's just been doing it for years and years, been through it all. They can just give you almost like shortcuts to like where you need to do, or like they've Tom sometimes, like, you know, I'll bring up an idea for him and be like, yeah, I had that same idea like a few years ago. Like this is why we do things a certain way, and like, it's just so important. But it's also, I think it's an important message to like other coaches, aspiring coaches out there like yourself, that sometimes maybe accepting some help is going to be very useful, or you know, asking for a second opinion, something like that. Like a mentor is so important.
Yeah. I find it really difficult just having confidence in myself and my ability, or if I've chosen the right program and things like that. So like when I work with Pete, like just being able to bounce it off him, like we might have got to the exact same program that I would have done eventually on my own, but being able to bounce ideas off someone is really important. I love the thing of, I mean, if you're not winning, like, why not change anything?
Yeah, it's the downside.
Yeah, exactly.
That almost gives you the advantage over those that have won a lot, because they're not changing anything. It's been the worry with, you know, GB rowing for a while. You know, if you keep winning for ages, you know, and you don't change them, you don't change anything. You see other programs like New Zealand.
I think other programs catch up.
Yeah.
And I think we funded heavily early. You know, other programs are now putting more money in, and unless you're still being innovative, then you are eventually going to be that person that's only sat 4th place going, well, why aren't we winning?
And
I guess the question is, like, I think the thing we did really well was when we got to like that J16 quad, and we had that phenomenal year as a coaching team. We sat down and went, right, what did we do well that made us win, and what do we need to do again, and what do we change?
Yeah.
I think that was massive, and I think David was absolutely instrumental in that, because, like, as I say, he had this background and no one even knew about. That's what I find mad. It turns out he applied for my job and hadn't been given it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? So when I found out about that, I was like, mate, you need to be involved in this.
Yeah.
And I always remember, like, real simple stuff. Like, I find it really difficult to, like, if someone tells me something, I need to go away and take time on it. And David was really great at that. So I'd go up to him and be like, someone said this, and like I'd be really emotion driven about it. And he'd be like, no, just think of it like this. Like, just sit back, think on it. And he kind of always taught me how to develop that. But obviously, luckily in Hereford, there are quite a lot of, like, obviously you've got the special forces, you've got the SAS there. Mm. And so kind of ended up finding a couple of other mentors. So this guy called Mark Bellamy, a really weird story. He was a kayaker. He's a sports psychologist who'd done like 4 Olympiads, right? Now I'd been having physio in Oxford at the Bosworth Clinic, and was sat there one day a bit mopey in like the ergo room at Hereford Rowing Club because my hip wasn't great. This guy, Mark, comes in, short, stocky guy, lovely guy, and just like having a chat, and I'm telling him about my hip and saying I've been to this clinic, and he goes, oh yeah, my mate runs that, I helped set it up. And I'm like, no way, like, what a small world, why are you doing it here? And he goes, yeah, I coached at, like, I was this like psychologist at like 3 Olympics. And I'm like, no way. And so go out for a coffee with him. Suddenly 3 years later, I'm still working with him now, like just developing programs, send athletes to him left, right, center. And like, he was great because he, again, early doors was one of these people. Like, before the lockdowns, it might have been after the first lockdown, but basically we brought in a load of online webinar talkers. And Mark was like the first one. No, yeah, before the lockdowns, Mark came in and gave this sports psychology talk about just trying to like be better people. And so he became this amazing mentor, but also a mentor to the athletes because he was around at the boat club a lot as well. So people are just asking questions. And again, he'd have this fountain of knowledge and just freely give it out. I mean, this guy like charges 100 quid an hour. So these kids are getting something incredible. And Mark was so kind to do it. And I think we had him, and then finally a guy called Dan Simmons, who kind of worked the last 2 years, who runs a company, a performance coaching company, but not necessarily for like just coaches, but it's called Metro's Leadership. So just this leadership company, works with people from across the entire world. And he did a lot with the athletes and a lot with me and a lot with the coaching team to, again, try and develop that culture environment, because obviously we had this shifting culture. I think that was the biggest thing, is you had those 4 lads in the first year, and now they all went into year 12. We lost one of them. As we lost, he went to Windsor Boys, which I still think is probably the best thing that probably could have happened to him. He's now at Brown because of what Mark and Windsor Boys did, which is phenomenal. But we then had to try and fill that space. And also we had new year 11s coming in that were really keen. Had year 9s and year 10s that was like on the periphery looking at what they wanted to do. And so then we had a shifting culture, which was really weird, because it was no longer about these 4 lads and me. Had new coaches, David, and was still there, had this amazing guy called Paul, and we had to develop them. And then again, the next year, you got a change of culture again, where now you've got an entire high performance squad, entire year 10 group, but really keen, an entire year 9 group. They'd already been doing bits with the Hereford Rowing Club, who went to our school, and we were kind of working with them jointly, who they could like go and win, like potentially win that schools. And so the culture changed so much each year that I think we had to change with it.
That's incredible, that just by being brave and like trying to go out and do something like that you really believe in, you can create a snowball effect that will just impact possibly hundreds of people and kids at Hereford, even like years after you leave, a legacy.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of like quite a lot of, again, like I stand firm on that, like building a legacy at Hereford was so important, because, they'd started rowing in like 1870 and they were like actually pretty big. Like if you ask in the 60s, like Leander used to come up to Hereford. They used to race Hereford Regatta. That was actually a big deal. All the London clubs would go to Hereford because it's got a 2K straight river, right? So everyone used to come and race up there. But Hereford Cathedral School had been big in like the 1920s, but not really done much. And so, as I say, we had people go like caddies at Brown, like now in the US. He wouldn't have done that if he hadn't rowed. And that's phenomenal. We've got, Natasha, who's at Wycliffe now, like UCLA are in contact. She's going to go on scholarship. We've got people at Durham, Newcastle, places that they might not have gone to do rowing, and given opportunities that they haven't. And I think that's phenomenal. But even just simple stuff like, the value of the boats went from 10 grand total to like 150. And then we had a parent who came and committed. I think it might have showed you the boat last year, but we had this one of a kind Wintec boat that was custom built for us that, again, just leaves a legacy that now these kids have got 200-300 grams worth of kit in a boathouse that it just wasn't there before. And that was just 5 years of, I guess you called it brave. Like, I don't think of it as brave. We just did I think I did what firmly I believe needed to be done to make that club go fast. And I think that was purely because that's what I thought needed to happen. And I damn well know I stepped on people's toes, and I would always apologise to those people.
That's what it takes.
I think that's what it takes, but I think at the same time, like, that's sort of like it comes to a natural end at that point as well, doesn't it? Like, there's only so long you can keep doing things like that before people start actually kicking back. And I think I was probably reaching a point in my tenure at Hereford where I realised that for the club to keep progressing, I don't think I was probably necessarily the right person to be leading that because of the things like I'd done to get the club there. But actually, it needed other things. Like, we make that joke about admin, like that is something I was not great at because I was so athlete focused that actually then things had slipped by that shouldn't have done. And I've worked really hard to fix that now.
Yeah. So in terms of creating, like, obviously Hereford into what it is now, you've implemented a completely different culture and like approach to training and like just an entire new mindset of like how rowing should be, etc. But I also know that you're very big on your technical model and you're not afraid to go out and like try to do something that some people would consider unconventional.
Yeah.
Where, for example, like the traditional model of rowing is to be like very like leant over, rocked over, so that you can get a good grip, suspension, etc.
Yeah.
But you're more about the vertical side of rowing. Would you describe your technical model?
I think it depends on which you look at the crews. I think very much like, yeah, it's funny because someone else said that recently to me. They watched our video of our crew at Henley this year and they went, "You're very vertical, you don't do much lean." And I kind of said, well, like if you look at our crew from like a couple of years back, 2021, it's a bit different. And it's never really been intentional. Like, I kind of believe in the same things I suspect most people do. Get suspension, keep the boat going as horizontal as you can. Long strokes, distance per stroke can be really efficient. And I took a lot of that from Headington, rhythm, relaxation, efficiency, Ryan all used to hammer on about. But then for us, I just found that actually most of our kids, like, especially from the lockdown, lacked a lot of hip mobility, lacked a lot of control and stability in their pelvis, and therefore like tight hamstrings. We worked a lot on that, but at the same time, I wasn't prepared to put them into a position so far rocked over that they could actually potentially hurt themselves. And that tends to lead itself to, well, maybe being a bit more vertical. And you can do things like put them on a seat pad or drop their feet, but then you're just producing more vertical force. Now, I appreciate your ability to suspend might have been lower, but then it was about getting the work into the water to be really effective. Mm-hmm. I think if you look at our crew from this year, we had to make some pretty drastic choices on what that technique could look like. And I'd say every year the technical models changed quite significantly. Okay. But I think the big thing is that has stayed consistent is like let the boat move. But the thing that developed, I think, in 21, we were very good at distance per stroke. We went down Henley course at 31. And you go, what are you doing? Yeah. But they're all J16s. And actually, caddy as a stroke man, that's what made the boat move really fast. And we rated, that score was 26 average, 27, or it might have been 26 and a half average, something like that. Then 2022, we were up at like 32, 33, which was high for Hereford. And then in 23, we rated 38 down the course. And which you go, well, that's massive. That's 20% difference. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason is you just have got to work with the athletes in front of you. And so I wasn't stuck on one technical model because I think you've got to make the boat move fast as how the boat is. Yeah, absolutely.
Massively, yeah. I think there's so many people just regurgitating a model to the boat in front of them. And I think it's the next level to step up and just be like, well, what am I actually working with? And you look at smaller systems, like being in Hereford School, you don't have 20, 30, 40 kids. You can't just replace someone when they get hurt or if they don't quite fit the model. It's like you've got to look after everyone. And I think that's, to be fair, when we spoke to Lola and stuff, she was sort of saying in the GB system, it looks like they're trying to do a bit more of that individualized stuff. Because it's not, you don't just want the best hard-wearing athletes. You want the best athletes full stop. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because, like, I was talking to an athlete from Windsor, actually, because I bumped into me at uni now at Gloucester Head at the weekend. And we were talking about how he went, you always had that Hereford rock over. And I said, trust me, it was not intentional. So I say we're quite vertical. It wasn't necessarily intentional, but it was just what moved the boat quickest at that time. Yeah. But then it was, as I say, very much about like, in 23, Jack, our stroke man, was putting the quickest 2K, but he wasn't strong. As in, like, you'd get in the gym and he wouldn't necessarily be deadlifting 130, 140 like some of our other athletes, but he'd do all his free rate work at 38, 39, and he had the quickest 2K. And I was just a bit like, well, why don't we find out, put him at straight seat? And he was able to manage a rhythm at 38. Whereas when we put other people in, it was 31, 32, and the boat just wouldn't move as fast. And so Jack found basically like whip it through the legs and the hips, but a not massive body swing. And that's what made that boat go fastest. Now, we didn't have a year to bring that crew together. We had a lot of issues that year. You know, we had an athlete who probably, J16 who got the Friday at Henley. He had something go with his shoulders, like a technical thing that took I'm still working with him now to try and work it out. And so he was out of it, but he was probably going to be the quickest athlete. He was putting some phenomenal scores on the Yogo, but something happened. And then we had another athlete pull out for A-levels, and obviously they're trying to get into like Russell Group top uni. So we're trying to manage both of that. And obviously, I think fair play to him, like one of the athletes pulled out completely and I think made the right choice to get him in a position to go to university. One of the other athletes stepped back from rowing but not fully stepped off rowing. And so that just meant that we had, one J16, one J17. Well, what was it? Yeah, no, two J16s, one J17, one J18 in this squad. And you're going, well, hold on a minute, we've got two J16s that literally have, like one of them's only committed to high performance rowing this year and he played rugby for the first term. Then I've got a guy that's J18 who's done Henley twice before, medalled in that schools twice before. So he's got all the experience, but not been rowing that much. And then I've got this kid called Jack who I was like, well, put him a straight seat rate 38, did a rhythm at 38. And I was like, well, okay, we're actually moving a boat much better now at 38 than anything. I think the thing that probably changed about all of that technique is that early on in my career, I was so focused on making the boat run, like don't slow it down, because we didn't have people that were quick enough to pick it up. Well, if you don't slow it down, whatever speed you get it up to, you can keep it at. And that worked really well in like 21, 22 to an extent. But 23, it was like, right, well, we're not going to get the boat up to speed because we don't have time in it. So we brought the crew together a week before Marlow Regatta because I wanted to have to do singles and doubles at that school. So it has Marlow into Henley, and that was the only time in the quad we'd had it. And it was like, right, well, just get the boat up to speed. And we just worked purely on the front end. And I know you watched the video, and trust me, the front end's not perfect, certainly against Leander. And they outclassed us enormously. But that was by far the quickest crew we've coached. And it was just by working on a different style, because that's what we needed to do to make the boat go fast for what we had in 4 weeks, really.
Yeah. It's not about also like just following rigid patterns of like, okay, this is what we traditionally do. Okay, maybe this athlete has a different mobility, but let's force them into that way of rowing. I think it's really exciting to see like fresh blood in coaching where you can actually go like, okay, but what's the best thing for this crew? Okay, like fine, we might not rock over this much, but we're still getting enough compression in the legs. Yeah. Are we like really losing that much? We spoke with Paddy from Cambridge, and he was talking about his pet peeve is when people say sit up. He just immediately goes, why?
Yeah.
Like, why? What's the reason why you're actually doing this? Like, be tall, be forward, etc. Get the compression, but I think we need more of this. And obviously, the testament to like the work that you've done is the results that you've managed to like produce at the national scene, which would have been decades before Hereford's done something similar.
I think part of that was, I think personally, actually, most of that due to those 4 athletes that started and the people that followed that. Like, obviously, I think we were very like. I think there are some things, and one of my friends called me a strict coach the other day, and I said, no, there are some things that I think make a boat go very fast, and I'm very strict on those. Like, that is what we do, and we do that really bloody well. And I think certainly there are some things that I still need to develop as a coach on top of that. And I think you can see that from Hereford on that 2023 crew, was much more about the drive and the pickup. Whereas before, we always just worked like back-end recovery, get into right shape, but never enough on the drive phase. And at the end of the day, it's not dressage. Like, you know, fastest from A to B wins. So it's not dressage.
Yeah.
But I think, there was like, I slipped 2 discs from doing rowing. And I think like, I don't want to do that to a kid. I want to get them to be able to pick up their kid at 30 years old and hold them into the air. Like, I can't pick things up now and hold them in front of me. And I worry that if I do that to a kid, what impact does that have? And so there are elements to like, okay, we need good pelvic control. We need that mobility. We need that end range strength. But actually, if you don't have to just follow what you're doing, then that's fine. But I think also, in effect, you're trying to get more work in the water than anyone, more efficiently than anyone, and don't slow it down more than anyone. Rowing is inherently as complex as you make it, or as simple as you make it. I think I've talked to you guys about this before, but like, put big stick in ocean, push really hard, and then sit really still is like the most dumb way of being like, that's sort of rowing. You know, like it's been around for thousands of years. People use it as transport. What do they do? Stick it in, push, let it move, do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, this I was so funny. I mean, Tim was telling the story when he was cycling along at Henley with Jürgen, watching Pinson and Redgrave, and Jürgen said to him, "Oh, do you ever wonder why I don't have a go at what Pinson's doing? And 2 hands up together and leaning out the boat." And Tim was like, "Well, I guess." And he was like, "Look at the bubble.
Yeah,
like, it's just going.
Boat's just moving.
Yeah,
boat's just moving. Yeah."
And I get he was always famous quite a lot at Caversham for just being on the stopwatch. You know, you don't hear a lot out of him. He's not going to give you a lot of technical stuff, but like, where are we?
Yeah,
like this is how we're going to measure ourselves. Ultimately, yeah, he's working with fantastic athletes anyway. So how much more can you add to it? But yeah, I think the thing from Hereford Cathedral is like, I think there's a lot of people that could, you know, try and hide between them. Well, I've only got a small school and I don't have that many athletes and we don't have any history and we don't have any boats and we don't have any money. It's like, well, Ben did it. So
yeah, I do.
You know,
There is, I think,
there's always a bit of luck, always.
Yeah, there's definitely luck, but I think at the same time, like being willing to graft, and I think that's like I think I say this a lot, but like I think I stand a lot of my personality on how hard I'm willing to work, and it doesn't even necessarily mean I'm going to work efficiently. I think that's really important. Is that like there's a difference between working efficiently and working your ass off.
Oh, I understand.
But those little things are just so important. Like some of the stuff you meant, you know, we're in 100, 150 gyms a year. And I really notice now when you go into a gym and there's nothing on the wall.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of clubs that do really well on that now. And they're past winners and they make sure that these are being updated. And you can see that there's like a group mentality here. And you go into a gym that's like super empty. Like, just missing out such a huge trick. Yeah, it's like such a small thing. But
Not even a PB belt, yeah.
Yeah, most people have got PB belts now. Yeah, little things like that. And just in terms of the kind of equipment, obviously we fix our own machines. Like one of the things we always do at the end is make sure we clean them all down. And that's not actually going to make you row any faster. But I know, especially at schools, universities, clubs, better equipment that looks better gets looked after way better. And it just makes people feel like, you know, the effort that they're putting in is being reciprocated.
One of the really big things did at Hereford was that anytime we erged, you didn't put your kit on the floor, and then on the did, I'd just pick it up and fold it up and put it on the side. And it sounds really minor, but I'd say like that logo, that kit meant so much to me. So like you don't put it on the floor because like it's a concrete floor, it's dusty, it's dirty. Like you pick it up, you fold it up, you put it on the side, and like it literally feels like inside out with the arm hanging out. Like I felt like my mum doing my kids washing, like put it out, fold it up properly. But again, the point of that was always like we take care of what we have, and even if you have got like it's just shit kit, like, you know, it's this old rickety wooden clinker that's like been around 50 years, right? Well, you can still win in that. You know, I don't think necessarily like the boat made us go fast. It's the thing we did to take care of the boat. And, you know, we spent a load of money getting some boat bags made from Burnham, and we literally had like our logo embroidered with the best boat bags you get. Like it's nicer than my bloody duvet, right? But every single time you'd walk in the bay, we'd have all of the boats in boat bags. So you have to literally get the boat out, unfold the bag, zip it back up, fold it back up. You weren't allowed to put it on the floor because obviously it would get dirty and dusty. At the end of a session, you wash the boat, dry the boat with towels, put it back in the boat bag. And at the beginning of each season, I'd walk people through the bay and be like, that boat there, that's legacy. That boat you're not going to see for this year. That's got carbon riggers. Like those riggers are in a safe place at home. You're not going to see that boat come out of its bag until someone learns it. And like in 21, we got the carbon boat, but we had an aluminium wing boat and a stamp fleet. We used a stamp fleet for the first half of the season, then moved into the aluminium, and it was only like a week before Nat Seals when the kids had proved to me that they could look after legacy, that they were allowed to use it. And it was simple stuff like that. And I'm at the beginning of the year being like, yeah, that boat's won Nat Seals, that boat silvered, you know, that boat, and any boat that had a logo on. So we put logos onto boats that had won things. And like logos, you'd get a logo on your blade if you'd won a race. And little stuff like that where actually like you feel like you're earning pride. And then the kids took such pride in that. And I think we talked about like a lot about Hereford pride, you know, what it means to be part of like Hereford Cathedral Boat Club. And it's simple things like we knew that we weren't going to be Windsor boys at most things, right? And I remember we went down to a training day with them and they like rigged 27 boats, got 27 pairs of blades down to a landing station in 40 minutes. Politely, my lads couldn't do 3 in that time at that period. But it wasn't necessarily just about winning the race. And we saw that from people like Windsor boys, how incredible that culture is. So we started doing things like, you know, putting your blades out properly, you know, actually like put it spoon up so you can see the logo, put it so it's perfect. Like bow pair, 2 pair, 3 pair, 4 pair in that order, and you put it nearest to the landing stage. And then first night schools we did that, we had 1 pair. Then next year we had 3 crews. Time after that, finally at 23, we had like 9 crews, and you'd see all of our blades and all of their spoons with the logo on, taking up half a landing stage. And you're like, that looks incredible. And the kids took such pride in that. And I tell you, it's hard to explain to people like the amount of work and time and money that as individuals we put into that, to then see that shining back at you was just incredible. Like, I can't say enough. Like, those kids that had as much fun as we did, but had like, however hard they'd work, I'll try and work harder.
Yeah, I think it's like boss is boss and leaders lead. I think if you want kids to go a certain way, you want to show them, like you said, you're not telling them to fold the clothes, you're there folding it for them. You're showing them the way, which I think is really important. But also it's just that hard work pays off.
Yeah.
I mean, live in a culture more and more and more these days where everyone wants everything now for nothing.
Yeah.
And they want the outcome without putting in the effort. But I think if you can like have a system that teaches, like you say, the better you do, the better equipment you get, the better kit and all these sorts of things. And yeah, I mean, there's that speech, I'm sure everyone's heard it, sort of make your bed. Have you heard that one? Like, start out your day by making your bed. Yeah. And it's just, it's the small things we're talking about. You can't do anything 100% better, but you can do 100 things 1% better. Yeah, like that kind of stuff. And it's cliche to say, and we've spoken about it before, but yeah, it is everything. It is about thinking about the whole thing as one. I think it's really interesting.
I absolutely love what you've implemented. Like, even such small things, like most people won't even notice how the blades are laid out on landing stage.
Yeah.
Like, I remember one time we raced at I think it was Reading Amateur Regatta, and in my Henley quad we've had the bow had 1 sticker on the blades, then the 2-seat had 2 stickers, etc., etc. And like, someone pointed out at the start line, be like, wow, these guys have actually like got organized and everything. And like, people from the outside might not notice this, but when you're racing, it's different. Like, if you've earned a boat, okay, this boat has done this. There is a certain expectation that you can like hold yourself up to. Okay, I've earned this. That means I'm doing something right. Like, it speaks better to your confidence, and also you don't create a culture of entitlement. I think some schools potentially struggle with that.
I think I think even simple stuff like in the boats, obviously they'd been epoxied, so it was like shiny gloss. And so we had a rule where like you can't just put like no metal water bottles because you scratch it, and you've got to put any kit in a towel. And so I went and bought like 20 like obviously like gold towels, because obviously boat club's gold, but like put 20 towels in. So every single seat had a towel in that you could put your kit. But again, every week they'd go home and get washed, and somehow the kids were convinced it was magic that they'd stay clean. They realized we'd bloody spend all weekend washing these 30 towels, right? And then like simple stuff like even like speed coaches, when like we didn't have them, so I went and bought a load. Radios, like kind of realized early on that actually if you wanted a high performance boat club, like there needs to be 10 of me or 10 really good coaches.
Yeah.
And Hereford, not they weren't providing the coaches, we had coaches, but there just weren't enough coaches or the amount of time, or you know what I mean? Like, you always want more time, you always want more coaches, you always want more availability with athletes, right? And we couldn't have any of that, so we tried to be more efficient. So we put radios in every boat. And little things like that actually had such a big impact, because again, you put ownership. Like, if you didn't bring a radio out, I didn't tell you to go and get one. You just didn't get coached.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh shit, I'm not getting coached today.
Yeah.
The people that would be upset by that would go in and get a radio. And it's things like that I think also have an impact, because you start to take ownership of every detail, but you start to also implement more things to take care of. So you're always pushing the boundary of the things that you take care of. And suddenly you're developing people that, you know, understand how to clean things, take care of things, take value in things. Like, remember weird things like a radio. Well, it's not really about the radio, is it? It's about you. You know, if you're the radio guy in the quad and you don't get it, well, now you've let your teammates down, and so that's on you. So then you start taking ownership as a group as well. And I think there's quite a lot of things that we probably did that, as I say, in isolation don't look like big details, but add up into part of the recipe to everything to really be a big deal. Dan Cooper at the under-19s always says, like, it's about like grains of sand. Every 5 minutes you have a grain of sand. You know, I put it into like your world-class jar or your normal person jar. I don't think it's as straightforward as like, well, you know, Wilkie always talks about a full water bottle is what is world-class, and the connotation behind that. I agree with that. But I think also, as long as you're trying to get more into the good jar than the bad jar, that's how you're learning.
Yeah, and we're talking about like obviously school kids here. So like, just even outside of rowing, the kind of habits and the culture that you're instilling in them, that's going to carry into their work life, into their uni life, into how they're revising, possibly into their other areas of, their everyday existence. So I think it's so important, which is why I'm super happy that we can like share the message of like what you've done out as well, because hopefully it will inspire other people to do the same and maybe think more about like, okay, cool, what does this team actually need, and like don't just follow rigid patterns.
I think the big thing was, as I say, realized early on that like I couldn't coach everyone. Now that we had like 8-9 crews, and I didn't really, if I'm honest, do a good enough job of coaching the coaches to be exactly what I wanted them to do. So I had to provide them some freedom, but at the same time do things that enabled that. So like we coached the athletes, and I said, well, right, you're on a quad, go and coach each other. Like row in pairs, coach each other. Yeah. And I tell you what, they always say, like if you want to learn to row, like row with someone better than you, or like be coached. The worst way is to actually be like taught to row by an outside coach, isn't it? Like row in a better boat, be coached by someone in a better boat than you, or be taught to row by your coach.
Or sit in a bow seat behind a guy from Brooks applying immense power.
Yeah, honestly, he was shaking that bloody rig, and I was watching him throw his body. Oh my God. I was like, I need to be doing more of that. Yeah. This is not bloody dressage. So
yeah, that's super important skills. And like Pete said, sometimes you forget, like, yeah, they are just kids and not everyone knows everything. But I'm 35 and I've got friends who will walk out of the house and be like, oh, my keys, like, or oh, I haven't got this, or oh, I didn't bring any money. Like simple, you're just teaching those kids, stop, right, we're about to go out. Have we got the radio? Have we got a stroke coach? Have we got water bottles? Have we got spare kit? Cool, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Like, and it's such a small thing.
I mean, even stuff, so like we had this chart from Dan Simmons, like it was called like the intention chart. And like he talks about like victim versus ownership a lot. Like, you screw up, right, take ownership. Like, and that's not a bad thing. Like if you screw up, great, fine. But like you've got to take ownership of that. And what we found is actually like early on is like you tell a kid like, okay, you're not doing this right. Yeah, but I've got this excuse, I've got this reason. Like, yeah, but don't deny it. Like just be like, yeah, cool, I screwed up. And actually turn around, apologize, fantastic, off we go, move on. Yeah. And so we put that up, and that was one of these things that I've kind of lived and died by. And so like in any of the squads that I now coach, it's like, right, are you being a victim or are you taking ownership? And the athletes started developing that. So they'd call out each other on that. Yeah. And that was like phenomenal, because suddenly you've got 20 people being like, okay, you didn't put your weights away. That's on you. Don't worry, I'll put it away for you, but next time you do it.
Yeah.
And then you've got people taking care of their own kit. You've got other people taking care of other people's kit. So when one person loses, it's not a case of like they fall off the map. It's more like a spider web, like part of it goes down, but everyone else pulls it back up and creates this almost like this net where you can be caught. Yeah. But also when one person does something really right, it drags the entire group up.
Yeah, I like the difference between fault and responsibility. So a lot of things that might not be your fault, but they're still your responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I didn't put my weights away. Oh, well, yeah, well, someone called me, something happened. Like, okay. Like it might not be your fault, but it's still your responsibility.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think we've been sort of been taught in our culture now, like especially with like suing and this sort of thing, is if it's someone else's fault, it's someone else's responsibility.
Yeah.
And like you said, that ownership thing of being like, yeah, but you're looking after you. Like, what are you going to do about it?
You're not responsible for everything that happens to you in life, but you are responsible for how that affects you and how you deal with it.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference, isn't it? Like how you as a person deal with the bad thing that happens to you is how that will impact everything. And I think Natasha, I won't go into full detail, but Natasha, the girl that went to Cuba, say from Hereford, is such a prime example of this. Had a really like a knee issue, had to have an operation, didn't really start rowing until like year 11 properly. And year 11 was like kind of a bit docile, like screwing around a little bit, was involved, but was like, you know what I mean, just like getting into it. Year 12, on the day of a 2K at 24, like Natasha was fast, right? But not like really fast. So we were predicting like a 7:35, 7:45 kind of odd 2K, just getting past the cutoff. Got a phone call, something bad had happened. And I said to her, how do you want to approach it? Like, what are we meant to do here? And she went, talk to me like any other athlete. And I said, right, okay, I'm getting fuck on with it then. Like, this bad thing's happened. You can't fix it, but you can use it.
Yeah.
And out of nowhere, she pulled this 7:24 2K at rate 24. And literally everyone in the room was like, where's this come from?
That's fast.
That's
for a junior girl, yeah.
Rapid. That's like a 6:30 for a...
She was rapid. And like when I tell you she hadn't really learned to row, like she came, bless her, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, she came second from last at November trials, full on last at February trials, like last to make it through the race off. And in that entire period was just like last, getting this bigger and bigger 2K. And then just at the very end, somehow pulled it all together and ended up going to Coop. And like proper like Superman origin story, right? But like that was the epitome of like how you interact with the things that happen to you will dictate what therefore you go and do. And she was basically like, right, well, my aim to go to the race off is not to come last. And she did. She was last to get into the group that went to the trials. And so go, well, fantastic. Like you beat your goal. And then was like, right, she went, well, what should my goal be to go to final trials? And I was like, don't fall in. Like, just don't hash it up. And had no expectations at all. Like genuinely, I sat there, like the year before I'd taken an athlete and I was like, hopefully he'll get in. And I didn't know the standard well enough and neither did he. Whereas with Natasha, I was like, well, politely, you're not the standard. Like, you'll go, enjoy it. So next year, we get you there. She went and shot this bloody vest. And I don't know who was more amazed, me or her, because I'll tell you what, 2 weeks beforehand, I was still trying to teach her how to bloody lean back. So
yeah, pressure and heat creates diamonds, right?
Yeah, I think that was it. I think that's it. And I think it is how you interact with those things. And I think that's probably Hereford all over, is actually like, we kept on coming up to these things, like the amount of time we had, the boats getting written off, the athletes we had, like COVID lockdown. I mean, over lockdown, we had 2 webinar series where we had like international people come in. So we had like Rowgear come and give a talk online. We had Rob Baker come and give a talk online, and had all these people, big names, come in and basically just keep motivating people. Had a Tom Wood, England rugby player, come in, and he was like fantastic as well. Not even rowing, he just was fantastic. Sports psychologist, sports nutritionist, and just giving these kids all these tools. And it's funny because we'd rock up to like the GB camps and they'd be saying about this stuff, and like the athletes were like, yeah, I actually know how to cook, like fully cook like a micronutriently dense meal that's going to make me really healthy. And like most of these kids have been taught how to squat. And then it's like, yeah, man, I'm basically a qualified chef from all this. And that was phenomenal because actually you realise the skills you'd given them, like might not even make them get to GB, but it meant that when they go to university, they're not going to be stuck going, well, I don't know what to do. Because like I went to uni and I had no idea how to cook proper food. I was eating really crap food and then funny enough got ill. I know at least the thing I've done at Hereford is that when those athletes go off and they need to cook or they need to take care or they need to know what physio is or who is a good physio, they have all those things in hand.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you, like, how do you now, having moved on from Hereford, how do you keep the hunger and like the persistence in trying to like improve in your new role at the British Rowing Star?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because obviously, like having left Hereford, literally just getting an athlete into GB or 2 athletes into GB, it was then like literally jumping straight from one into straight from the other with like very little like break. I had no break actually. And then I think I'm lucky in that I had athletes that had already been rowing for a year, and then basically sat them down, and it wasn't like a pissing contest, but it was like, look, here are the standards. You're on a program here, like it's a pathway program. You're a pathway athlete. We know that you have the potential to go all the way. Not saying that you will, but you have the potential if that's something you work at, you do the right stuff at. And then actually most of it's sort of the same, because the reality is like these guys coming in, like they wake up one day, they get an email being like, yeah, you could be an Olympian, mate. Good luck, have fun. And then they've got to come down to row. And they're like, well, yesterday morning they were going on, like they were getting back from a night out, absolutely paralytic. Next day, yeah, you could be an Olympian. Come and learn to row with us. And it's actually, if anything else, it's teaching the same standards, but the O scores are bigger, the athletes are taller. I think it's saying earlier, you've got 6'6", 6'7" athletes, 6'3" female. They're just normal people trying to develop the same thing. But I think actually, interestingly, since getting an athlete into GB, I think maybe my perception of what that is has changed. I think when I was younger, like I was so driven to be like, right, I've got to get GB, or I've got to get GB best. I've got to try and make these athletes go where they can go so that they can see their potential. And I think it's really important that like you have to make sure that like dragged or driven, and are you dragging the athlete or are you driving the athlete, and are they driving? And I know that on the performance pathway, these athletes coming in because they have the potential, and most of them within a year want to do it. And so then it's about looking at just those goals and about being a lot more process driven, because these goals, these athletes are going to hit a lot more threshold points. Like when we said it takes 4 years for junior to learn to row, these guys will take 2 years and might be at Caversham. So they're going to have a lot more in the way of high points, but a lot more in the way of low points, because they're going to hit these things where they don't know how to do it. They're going to flunk more 2K tests. They're going to be seeing bigger numbers with bigger pressure, but they're also going to be, having all the same things, disasters, fall in the water, put your blades in the wrong way around, fall out of a boat trying to land it, while potentially being like, in the entire time, someone whittling in their ear going, come on, you're on a GB program, you should be better than this.
So how do you like manage that pressure that's being inevitably put onto the athletes by saying you could be an Olympian? Okay, you have the potential. Now, surely that's going to like scare some people, right?
Yeah, I think we have at Nottingham we've kind of developed a couple of mantras. So like the first one is like you're still shit on Monday, and like like it's just like a bit of a running joke. Like Monday, like we were taking Sunday off for the first part of the season. So it's like, well, you come back first day back, like you're still in recovery mode. First session, it's a bit of a slog, isn't it? Like your legs are heavy, your heart rate's up, you're sweating a bit more, you're a bit more tired. And so it's like, right, it doesn't matter how fast you went last week, you're still shit on Monday, you're still who you are, like you're still at average, like you're still trying to develop. But I think it's reminding athletes like you are a pathway athlete. Like, yes, you're looking at trying to get into calcium in 2 or 3 years or going to work with Helen Brown at Eton in 2 years. But the reality is like you're still looking at 7 or 9 years away to go to an Olympics, and that's fine. I mean, but it's also like we always have like a graph like challenge support. Well, you know, the bigger the challenge, the more support you need.
Yeah.
So I think it's about putting 3 types of thing in, isn't it? Stuff that they can win at really easily. Stuff that's like, you know, okay, like you're in a like odds kind of chance, like 50-50, and then things that you're not going to win. And then it's about grading that and deliberately putting them in situations where like you develop the capacity where they know they can win. So that becomes a bit of a habit. Then you put them in positions where they might win and they have to actually put their skill into place. And then you put them in positions where they can't win, and then you watch them so they know how they handle losing. And then it's just about, I think, like doing a bit of an ebb and flow of those 3 to provide them the opportunity to develop in all 3 of those, but also knowing that I think they've got to know that there's a massive safety blanket. Mm-hmm. Like I deliberately will make people fail at things, but I also would deliberately be stood there right next to them when it happens.
Yeah, as a coach, your job is to like take an athlete through the entire spectrum of what it means to be an athlete and what it means to compete in a sport such as rowing, you know?
Yeah.
Learning how to lose is so important. Like Tom and I talk about it all the time.
Yeah, you don't, you learn almost nothing from winning.
Yeah.
You know, I used to sort of say you win to forget. You know, the year I won Henley, I didn't have to replay that race.
I bet you didn't sit there thinking about what did I do to win, did you? You went out, had a party, got your little red box, like, I've done it now, off we go.
And then the times you lose, you think, oh, what could I have done this? What about that session?
Yeah.
By that session in November where I didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
I just cut 4K off and hung around down the bottom of the island and was pissing around.
Yeah.
And then you start really playing into it. But how did you develop that idea of like those 3 areas? Is that something you did yourself, or is that something
honestly, I think as most coaches do, I think you extrapolate data from other people, aren't you?
Probably somewhere.
Someone's definitely told me that. I don't actually know who.
Yeah, I've never heard it so eloquently put, I think.
Probably like Dan Simmons. I rate Dan a lot. Although he's in Hereford, he's come and done some work down in Nottingham with us. But I think it is about, I don't know where it came from. I'm going to say it was me, but it definitely wasn't me. It was definitely someone else. But yeah.
I like it. Yeah, I really like it.
I just think like you need to, I think you're probably taking it on from something, but I think it is about like, that's the thing I learned from Hereford is like, we had those lads that won everything in their first year and go all the way to Henley. And then the next year, suddenly they're like, okay, well, we're best at J16. Next year, you're racing like Marcus Shooting, like J18, different guy, you know, different ball game. And suddenly you watch them lose for the first time and their heads have gone down. You're like, okay, they don't want to train anymore. That was really like quite hard hitting. So I think also I look at the athletes and you see the variance. We talk about trying to be like really grey, be really boring. Mm-hmm. Is like, you know, you're going to have more variance because these athletes can put an 85% GMT out one day and put a 68 the next. And you go, okay, well, great, you have your high, but you also have your low. What is the middle ground? And, you know, obviously that's why when people do like trials and that, you take the average of two directions. I think it's the same way with training. You've got to look at the top level and the bottom level and try and put in, well, where's the midline? How do we reduce your variance while pushing the top level up? You know, you're trying to bring the floor up and push the ceiling up. But if you push the ceiling up massively high, but the floor's still really low, when it goes wrong, you're falling a damn far long way. And obviously what you don't want is an athlete to be really high one day and really low the next, because they just can't perform like that. And I think, you know, we talked at Hereford a lot about being like, you got to be the best person on your worst day, because, you know, how many days a week or even a year are you in your best shape? Like you wake up one day and like, oh, I feel mint, happy days. But the reality is that's not on race day. If you're going to go to the Olympic final, you're not going to wake up and feel like you're in your best position on the Olympic final. Well, I wouldn't expect so anyway.
Yeah, a few years Mike Spracklin in 08 with a Canadian 8 who said their mantra was, we don't train to win on our best day, we train to be good enough to win on our worst.
Yeah, I'm a massive believer in things like that.
Yeah. And I like that sort of aspect of like, if you are constantly waiting for everything to be perfect, you'll wait forever because it doesn't exist.
I think people talk about rowing like it's, you know, it's this closed loop, repeatable linear movement. And so they say that, you know, people who love that repeatability come into the sport. And I look at that and I sort of agree, but I sort of disagree, because no two strokes is the same. Like, and that's the whole point. Like, you can't chase a perfect stroke because you're never going to get it, because the water is different, the speed of the hull is different, the temperature is different. Every stroke, you're in a different patch of land and a different patch of mentality. You're not, you're never on the same thing. It's never as closed loop as it can be. You're not in a hermetically sealed chamber, a robot. You're a human trying to do a movement. So if you can't make it perfect, stop trying to. Don't get caught up on it, and just try to make it really good, have a lot of fun, and ideally go really fast. And pretty sure if you do all three of those, you tend to win more stuff than you do if you're really miserable and hate it.
Yeah. Again, I'll come back to it again, but I think it's just eloquently put by Vicky Thornley when she was, I guess, between all three of us speaking to, we sort of realised there's kind of three things you need to succeed. I think it was Ben, I guess, first.
Yeah.
Turn up, train hard, have fun. So be consistent, be intense, and like work consistently, work in an intense way, but have fun.
Yeah.
And it seems like you can continue for a certain amount of time with two of them. So there will be periods in your career, if you take it to the top, where you won't have that much fun.
Yeah.
And as long as you're consistent and hardworking, you can keep doing. But you can't go for very long without all three of those things. You can work hard, but if you're not showing up, it's not going to make a difference. And you can have everything but not have fun. So I think that's kind of the key. Is how I keep those three plates spinning, I guess.
I think that's been the big thing now, working with people that are like performance development athletes, like obviously they're pathway athletes. So you're always sat there thinking, okay, what does 9 years time look like? And I've never had to think that far. If I'm honest, at Hereford, I was always trying to think about, like, what do the next 2 weeks look like? How many fires am I trying to put out? And now you're looking at athletes who, potentially putting scores that are actually only 6 months, a year away from GB scores, but knowing damn well that it's going to take them 3 years to learn to row that well. So how do you keep them engaged and involved and not falling off track? And actually, I read a study somewhere where, like, the average athlete, it might be the average football player, takes like 42 days a year off, something like that.
Wow.
And actually, I thought, well, if that's in rowing, you do 2 sessions a day and call them 12K, that's 24K a session. You suddenly do that, that's 240K in 10 days, right? And then you go, okay, well, times that by 4, add a little bit for the extra 2 days. You're suddenly hitting like just over 1,000 kilometers if that's a 12K session. And you come up against like a single sculler that's done 1,000 kilometers more than you, you'll know it. You come up against a quad that's done a crude 4,000 kilometers more than you, you're damn well going to know it, because they're going to be 4 lanes up on you from 500 meters in.
Yeah.
And so I think the consistency, that's one thing that I've really tried to change, actually. Is like, just be consistent. Like, don't turn up if you're feeling incredible. Don't do your UT2 always at like the highest split. Like, be okay being a bit slower. Sometimes if you're feeling really shit, actually that's when you need to push on, because you're not going to feel great on the day. So we do quite a lot about, like, your mental is different from your physical. But at the same time, if you're feeling really good, it's fine. Sometimes go and push on, but sometimes don't. So you know what it feels like to be okay. But I think actually being absolutely okay is what you really need to be in 90 your training. I don't think, like, I always look at my training, I gave everything. Like I might have said to you before, my UT2 was 2 splits slower than my 30 or 20. I was giving everything. And it's really easy to work really physically hard, but it's quite hard to work physically really for a long period. I think you're looking at 4 or 8 years of doing the same thing day in, day out.
I definitely came towards the end of my career realizing actually that I thought the whole time that the toughest thing was just to work fucking hard.
Yeah.
And like just turn up on a half-hour day and just absolutely end yourself. But actually, in the grand scheme of things, that's a lot easier than having the confidence to say, I'm not 100% today, so I'm going to back off.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to stay behind and do 45 minutes more stretching, or I'm going to speak to the physio, or I'm going to check if my blades are at the right, whatever it is. It's like actually the gun-ho, switch your brain off and just
rip it.
Yeah, is probably one of the easier bits. I guess as once you learn how to do it, there's a learning process, is learning how to sort of like work that hard and have confidence in your ability not to fall off the edge. But yeah, I think when I speak to a lot of athletes as well now, and I would say the same thing, like, sometimes it's much harder to tell your coach that, you're not 100%, or like these things are actually the more difficult part of it. Certainly the further you get, the more important those bits become.
I talked to Helen Brown, who's running the Eton centre at the moment, and I asked her, like, what is it that you want from your athletes? And it was really interesting because before rowing, she didn't even mention rowing. She just went, I need professionalism. I was like, okay, give me more detail. And she went, I need to know when an athlete's going to hit the ground before they do, because I need to be able to catch them and stop them. And if they can't communicate that with me, they're not going to last. And I thought, like, that was like a proper wow moment. And it's so true, isn't it? Like, I waited until I literally had torn a hamstring twice on an external bleed before thinking, okay, maybe I should try and stop what I'm doing here. And I think, well, what if I'd, had that when my hamstring first started hurting? What if I'd just taken a week off instead of turning up and being like, come on, Henry, I need to push this? Because it's not like I was fast in the first place, but if anyone had turned around and been like, take a week off, mate, like it's going to be fine. That 1 week is like, I always say to the athletes, like if you take today off, you might be able to train for an entire week, but you push today, you might be out for the next 6 months. Yeah. What is it you want to have? And I think that's mega important.
Yeah, consistent, do 100% of the program. It's not 100% of yourself. Yeah, we used to get told at Leander, I'd come into Christmas and Banks would be like, well, we got to keep going until like 23rd because, all these sick days, we would get more, if you guys weren't always sick and injured, we wouldn't have to train this much. And if I'd had a good winter, I'd be pissed off because it's like, well, that means I'm doing more because I haven't had any time off. But then there are other winters.
Well, the inverse of that is that you say, well, if you weren't doing so much training, would you have been as sick and injured? You know what I mean? Like, there's always those things, isn't it? Like, are you doing the right stuff or are you doing just stuff right? Yeah. I think you have to be really careful about, like, you hear loads of more is more. And that's certainly true when you keep the quality and you are robust enough to handle it. But like when you ask about the athletes I work with are not robust enough to handle 150, 180k. But that's physiologically what they're as fit as people that can do that. But they've been rowing 8 months a year, maybe 2 years.
It takes time to build up that base and just even your body's resilience to training and being able to recover properly.
Yeah,
rowing such a new movement. It's not like if you come into football and you've done a lot of running, you pretty much got the movement. Like there's so much in rowing, and like we've done a bit of it. But again, like little things, I think of having the importance again. What's the first thing that always goes in your week if you haven't quite got enough time? Well, you get all the big sessions done, and you definitely lift weights, and you definitely made sure there was time for a bit of guns. But like, did that core session happen? Did you get on the fitness ball? It's those little things that are always the first bits that go, and it's a complete package. Rowing is your entire body. So,
and it's funny, isn't it? Because like the more time you spend with these athletes that are these big people, you realize like, okay, great, you're physically capable of pulling that split, but now try and do it 4 times a week and suddenly you've got an injury. And then you look at them and go, okay, well, why? Well, as you say, it's like the core's gone, or their pelvic stability is not in the right place and they're loading their lower back way too much. And like, yeah, you're right. You have 150k, but we've got to miss a session out. Well, great, we might take out like a UT2, but we'll keep the 30-20, we'll keep the 2k prep in, or we'll keep the performance piece in. And that might be right too, but at the same time, like we might be cutting out the one thing that actually is going to keep this athlete going for another 6 months. And I think it's important, like, we make a point, I think we do 4 or 5 weight sessions for the majority of the time at the moment, and we do core at the beginning of every single one. And it's not because it's like, I think it's because that is meant to be seen as the most valuable part of actually our program, because most of these guys can already bench press 100, bench for 120, whatever it is, like these massive numbers. Probably not 120. If they could, that'd be fantastic.
Oh, I was going to say.
Yeah, that's big. Yeah. But like, they're hitting these big numbers that you're like, okay, great, you can do that. But then actually try and get them to do a plank for 40 seconds and they're shaking and you're like, oh, this is actually like, you're globally robust. But the muscles that are going to get injured, they are not stable, or they can't handle that endurance load that, you think how many straights you go out and do in a session, 2,000-3,000 maybe. Yeah. You go, okay, well, great, put your lower back under 220 watts at UG2 at like a really light pressure. And you go, right, okay, well now do that 20 times a week. Well, you've got a back injury. What shock? Yeah. It's not really a surprise.
Yeah, it's interesting what I said. Like, I think because the thing that's expected of an athlete is that they can push themselves beyond their limits, and that's something that's guarded with honor, people who can do it, it's honorable, it's an amazing thing. Like, that guy can just put himself in an absolute hole, and that'll probably win you Henley if you're committed. That might get you a junior vest or an under 23 vest, but like you said, with the guys you're working with now and girls, if you're looking to be the best there ever was, or certainly the best at the time in the Olympics, that's the one part of it. The other part of it is to know when you're about to fall off the cliff. And we've spoken to, Vicky Thorney was vocal about this and saying that she was bad at that. And her time that she had a really bad period in her single was, coach sort of coming up to her saying, you look a bit fucked here. Like, you sure you're right? Oh, absolutely fine. Because I'm hardcore. I can do it. I can do
anything. I can hold on to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So knowing your limits, that's one half of it. And the other half of it is being able to do it. And this is a difficult thing to do. It depends where you are in your system, how advanced you are, how long you've been rowing, how much trust your coach has you. I've had coaches before, you get the balls to come up, I'm really not feeling well today. and they go, well, wow, there's 3 other people not going fucking rowing today, then, are they?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh shit, okay, yeah, I'll go row. You know, like sometimes a coach isn't going to listen to that. But again, like that's just becoming a fully rounded athlete. I think it's like knowing when to have the confidence. I say that to people, only you know, if someone comes up to me before no test, I'm not feeling very well. I'm like, okay, well, you know, like if you really ask yourself the question now, should you do it or shouldn't you do it? Assuming you've given them some tools of knowledge to a certain basic principle. Like I can't answer that question for you.
Yeah. I think that's something with Nottingham coming into it. I felt like there wasn't, again, like I'm always hot on culture, environment, attitude. So part of the big culture thing I actually was like, right, like step in and like you tell me what is going on, what you want to share with me on the day that you're not feeling great. And then we'll have that conversation and then you'll tell me what your plan is for the day. And actually giving athletes the freedom. I mean, only an athlete yesterday got an ergo and said, oh, my back really hurts. I said, well, I should only be rowing with us a month. I said, well, how long's it been? I thought, nearly a week. He said, why didn't you tell me? Don't know. I've never had to tell a coach before when something hurts. I said, what were you going to do? She went, well, I just carried on rowing on it, wouldn't I? I was like, get on the bike. Like, we need to have a conversation, because if you think I'm the coach that turns around and says, like, go on, just hurt yourself. Like, I don't care about your bag. You're looking at the wrong guy. And so very quickly, it's like, right, okay, you know, we've got a physio basically on tap with these athletes, because obviously they're big, they're robust. Well, they're trying to get robust, but they need to be able to see these people more often because they're doing more training. So I don't arguably believe that, like, just because they're doing more training and they're bigger, therefore they're more likely to get an injury. I don't think it means that, like, you can definitely mitigate it, but I don't think something means that you should have to be seeing a physio every month. But at the same time, I think them having the trust to be able to come in and be like, right, what does this mean? What do I do with this? Where do I take this? And actually, I think also being able to, like, you know, we've got this physio, and like I don't even try. Like at Hereford, I'd be like, okay, it might be this, it might be this. It's like, no, go and see a physio. Like, go and see this woman that's fantastic, and then she'll come and tell me what they need to do. And I'll sit there and go, okay, fantastic, thank you. And I just think to myself, like, I'm not an expert in what she's doing to make these athletes fit enough to be able to handle what program they're on. So I'm not going to try and tell the athlete what I believe they should be doing.
Yeah. In order for your athletes to like buy into your program and your way of coaching, like there needs to be a level of trust. Yeah. And it's so important to open that communication where it's actually normal and comfortable for them to be like, okay, my back's hurting. But obviously sometimes you need to like know when the athletes are like playing the games and when they're not. But like, I guess you're going to like find that out soon enough. But I think it's important to sort of like be more open to those kind of discussions rather than just be like, shut up, get on with it, basically.
Yeah, I can think back and there were some times when maybe I was like a little bit ill, but like I could get stuff. I was ill once on training camp and the coach said, just jump in, you know, it's UT2 this morning, let's see. And I was just like, listen, I feel awful. There's no way this is happening. And then I did it and I was like, oh shit, like I did. It was all right. It wasn't perfect, but we got it done. So there is like that line to tread. But then I also think like, you know, like no coach is going to drag someone to the Olympics. Yeah. And it's like, do you know what? I really didn't want to be here, but actually, because you showered at me every morning, and I just got it done, and look at where I am. Oh my god!
You like it's not going to Olympics.
Yeah.
Oh, what happened?
So ultimately, like, yeah, you can give them a push a couple of times, but like, if the person's not responding, like, well, that's on them. You know, it's not for me to like wake you up and make sure you get there and make sure you're working hard. Like, you gotta. Well, you said like dragged or driven, right? Yeah, exactly that.
Lead a horse to water, can't make it drink it. Yeah. So rowing is basically a never-ending task. The more things that you can like see and think about improving, that you can just keep filling up a list.
Yeah.
How, as a coach, how do you prioritize? Whether you focus more on technique, on fitness, on physio, on preparation, like how do you even like begin to organize such a behemoth of a task?
I think if you know me, you'll know I'm not organised, so don't worry about that. No, I'm kidding. Oh, how true that is. I think it always comes back to like, I think first off it's like bang for your buck. Like I think first off it always depends on who's in front of you and what you're looking at. So with a group of athletes I look at, it's like, right, well, what's bang for the buck? Like, you know, if you think about, I suppose if I talk about it like it is Hereford with people that are like normal first off, like you have time to make them strong, you have time to make them get them in the right shape, and you have time to prioritize getting the right skills. But I think you've got to look at it on a hierarchy of needs. I mean, so one thing I always notice is like the whole like proper squaring, feathering. I never used to really care that much about. Like I cared about it, but I never saw a massive impact of it until then I had people at J18. I was like, what are you doing with your hands? Like, you're throwing yourself into the catch. You're not able to sustain. You're not able to, square in time with your seat. Suddenly I look at that and go, oh, actually that's now coming up higher in my priority list than it was 2 years ago. But I think it's all about, like, for me, it's like, right, how do we get athletes to turn up consistently day in, day out, perform to a standard that is like the standard of the program they're in, enjoy it to a level where at least they want to come back again, and then how do they feel like they're developing? And then finally I kind of think it's like, how do I do that without me completely blowing my socks off day in, day out? And I think that really is like, really at the moment it's like, right, consistency is key, because we know that the more consistent you are, the better you're able to perform long term. And then I think from that you look at like your technical stuff, and I think, at Hereford we had a really good technical model, and that worked for those athletes, and that was dynamic. But then, different athletes, different shapes, different sizes, so that kind of changes. But I think it's just about picking a couple of fundamental things, and it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole on certain things, isn't it? Like I always look at like the age old pause, no pause, always one of those things, isn't it? Right? Like you're never gonna not hit that one. That's such a rabbit hole. But really, if it makes a boat go fast, do what makes a boat go fast. Like, look at the pins, look at the hull, and then look at the athlete. But then also you can invert that and say, well, if the athlete's feeling good and they can do it themselves, well, great. And I think you just got to look at like that level from the technical side, the bit about consistently turning up to get the best out of the athlete. And then you've got to look at the actual training of what the athlete's doing to kind of then go and say, well, what do they need to go faster? What is it that's important to them that makes them go faster? I've got one athlete who, when I first started, I believe they need to be hitting 140k a week. And I was like, that's actually too much for them. But they believed it. So I had to kind of have a frame shift to be like, look, it's not about the volume you're doing, it's the quality of the volume you're doing. And you can increase the quality and decrease the volume, and you'll go equally as quick. So you hit that minimum effective dose. But I think you have to break it up a little bit, don't you, into different sections and work one at a time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I sort of look at the bottleneck. What's the biggest problem right now?
Yeah.
And especially with like novice crews or new rowers, you look at the crew and be like, okay, there's a lot going on here, but like what first? But then again, you'll get in the discussion like catch or finish first, right? Are you where are you going to start from? Like for me, I don't know. For me, I think the catch is such a specific, like a really like important, but also like very, very precise movement.
Yeah.
So I think you can learn a lot more early on from just getting that push out, getting the blade out, like I said, not slowing it down. Then we'll get to the really specific part of that. But like,
basically, there's so
you can do either way, can't you?
Yeah, there's so much to go on, and you've named a lot of things that could be improved. But what I'm hearing is just stay open-minded, and then just work for your athletes. Understand that you're there to help them improve, and not impose something rigid on them.
I think the big thing that I really stand by is like, every day you have a new athlete in front of you, even though it's the same person.
Yeah.
Like, I just think like, if I wake up every morning feeling slightly different to how I did yesterday, my athletes damn well will. And so if I'm feeling different and they're feeling different, we are new to each other. And one of the big things I said when I first came into the job with the Performance Development Academy is like, these athletes, yes, they've been rowing, but they can tell me whatever story they want and I'll believe them. So I've got an athlete who said, I'm going to be an under 23. And I went, great, fantastic. We sat down and went, okay, well, here's a standard. And she went, I can't hit that. There's no way I can hit that. And now she's not only hit it, she's jumped past it. And now she's leapt past it. And hopefully, touch wood, at the end of the year, she'll be one of the top under 23s. I don't know that yet, but the reality is, like, you let an athlete tell you what they believe about themselves, and then you work and hold them to that accountable belief, and they'll go and do it. But they are a new person every day they walk in the gym. And I think to remind yourself and treat them like that every day gives them the opportunity to rewrite who they are. And it gives you the opportunity to rewrite what you see in them. I think if you do that, then the athlete, on a day when they're feeling great and they're performing really well, you can remind them of that when they're feeling bad 3 days later. And suddenly they're not sat there having generated a story about themselves saying, oh, I'm shit at rowing. Some people have bad months, people have had bad years, right? But if you can remind them consistently that they're doing good things outside of that, performance or not performance goals, they can keep rewriting their story. And I think everyone attaches, a bit like our culture, isn't it? Everyone attaches a story about themselves to themselves. I am this because of this. But if you can allow an athlete to feel like they can rewrite that, then they can tell themselves whatever story they want, and then they will start to believe that they're capable of doing that.
It's just so beautiful. That's so profound. I absolutely love
I
that.
feel like that's the intro.
Yeah.
Stab that. Yeah, amazing, mate. Amazing. Absolutely. Like, we laughed before you saying, "Oh, you've had so much great guests on," and like, how come I'm here? And it's like because we've heard
Because you're going places. Yeah. Because you're going places.
Well,
you've just really like found a great way to vocalize a lot of different things that we all have been doing and thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like it's not reinventing the wheel, but I think you just got a really great way of talking about it.
I think I always, it's funny because I had my leaving speech at Hereford and one of the coaches came up to me and went, I said, how was it? What do you think of it? He went, I've heard all those buzzwords before. And I didn't say anything at the time. And it just grated on me like one of these little like mouse in my head. And a couple months later, I was like, he just thinks that's buzzwords to him. Like, but to me, that's like genuine. Like I actually genuinely like believe this stuff. I believe this waffle that I'm saying. Like I believe in building a genuine legacy. I believe in like helping athletes be able to rewrite who they want to be. Because actually then that gives you results.
Yeah.
Because like at the end of the day, you're not born an Olympian. Like you might be born with a big set of lung, but you're not born an Olympian. You have to make choices consistently. And it's a bit like people talk about like, you can't coach hardness. Actually, you can. I don't think it's as simple as like, like you're born hard in like a rough environment. So you become like that person. Like you have to make choices. And I think it's about providing those choices and opportunities. I think actually like if you believe in it, and the athletes believe it. Like I believe in it so much. So like the first thing I did when I got to Nottingham is I spent 2 weeks painting the boat bay because it looked really shitty and it looked like no one cared about it. So I just repainted. I spent, oh my God, it was horrific. 2 weeks painting the bloody ceiling of this concrete boat bay that looked like a military bunker. Now it's just flooded. So I'm going to have to do it again. God damn it. But actually like it means that the athletes see that I care. And I didn't do it for the athletes. I did it because like I walked into there and I was like, hold on a minute. I've got a British Rowing logo on my chest. Like to me, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I want to feel like I'm that person. And if I walk into this bay and I don't feel like I'm world class at what I do, how can I bring an athlete in and say, you're going to be an Olympian in what looks like an old military bunker? It doesn't feel like that.
Set standard.
Yeah, it takes so much to go the extra mile for some people, and some people just find it naturally easier, and that's why they'll go further and be more successful. And you're a prime example of that, I think.
I don't necessarily know if it will actually make me go any further, but I think it makes me downright happier when I do it.
Well, if you take pride in your environment and what you do, and in everyday responsibilities, let's call them, like that will definitely make you go faster. And
I'll have another interview in 5 years' time. We'll find out what happens.
I will have you on again next year.
I like that. Yeah, maybe we'll find out. I'll have to come and visit Nottingham while look at the bloody paint.
We'll help you repaint it. We've done a bit of that at the Oxford College we were coaching.
Yeah, it's funny. It's the same thing I did at the first point I became in charge. It's just some horrible old boat shed, and I repainted it in club colours. Again, it wasn't to impress anyone else. It was just to be, here's the standard. I like the quote: "The standard you walk past is the standard you accept."
Yeah,
and I think if you're willing to, walk past rubbish on the ground, or you're willing to leave, blades out on the landing stage, those sorts of things. Like we've talked about this whole thing, like all those little things add up. So,
I one of my athletes that I was working with has moved to Hartbury, and I bumped into his parents at the weekend, and they were telling me like they have praise reports, and his first praise report was because he saw a girl that he thought was in distress, so went and found someone to go and stop it. It sounds like the woman wasn't in distress at all, but the parents were like, that's something that he's developed because of all the standards of the things. And I don't think that stands what we did. That's just that he's developed his standard of like, that's the right thing to do. And I sat there and I was like, if nothing else, like that kid is going to be like a world-class person because he's not willing to sit there and just abide by a standard. And it turns out loads of other people had watched and not got involved, but he took it on himself to get up, get involved, and put a stop to something that he thought was a problem. And I just thought, like, as you say, like, if that's the standard of what he's willing to do for a random stranger, what's he willing to do for the people he knows and cares about? What's he willing to do for his crew? You know what I mean? Like, he'll go that so much further. I think, well, when it comes to it, if you're going to put yourself on the line to help an athlete, if you're in that crew with him, he's going to like rip his own legs off to help you walk. So you know that he's got your back at every moment. And I think like if you can develop that standard as a coach in the athletes, then they can take it on themselves. And so longitudinally, you're helping not only them, but every crew that they go with. I think that's what's been really exciting about watching our athletes go and progress elsewhere, is that actually most of the feedback we get is, oh, they're lovely kids. They're great human beings. They're really kind, really helpful. And obviously like, the kind of side point to that is that half of them are getting bloody GB vests. That's fun to watch as a coach, but actually it's nice to know as a person that making people that aren't novices, I think.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
One thing that they don't tell you about standards and legacy is that it has a massive ripple effect into other areas.
Yeah.
So that's just absolutely great to see.
I think the ripple effect is massive. And I think that, that's so nice because actually, like, obviously now that I'm not at Hereford, I'm still seeing them around, but they still walk around with that same Hereford pride. Like one of the kids from Hereford came to do some work in Nottingham with us for 3 days. Like he still came, folded up all his kit, rocked up 10 minutes early, did all the stretch and didn't even say hello to him until he was done because that's sort of the standard. He didn't want to talk. He was like, well, I'm going to sort myself out. And you're like, right, fantastic. He's folded his kit. He comes to you ready to work. And then you're like, right, well, now you are in a position to work. I'm in a position to help you.
Yeah.
And we've not set off on a foot where I'm like, right, you've not got your kit back. You've not got your right stuff. I'm frustrated. You're frustrated because you've got a bollock in. No, we're in a perfect position to get on and do what our job is. And I think actually like making it easy to be good, I think is, I don't remember who was telling me about it, but like, if you make the easy stuff easy, so you can make the hard stuff hard. A 2K test is bloody hard. But if you can get there, do the right warm-up, be in the right kit, now you're sat there being like, well, none of that was stressful. Now I can get on and do the bit that I need to do really well. Suddenly that's easier than actually if you're rocking up, you're 10 minutes late, you're already shit the bed because you're like, I'm 10 minutes late, I'm stuck in traffic, you're rushing to get there. In that you've left one of your shoes in the car, oh, sorry guys, I've got to be even later. Actually, now you're in a position to go and perform. So teaching people to make it easy.
Yeah, it's so important to keep that sort of thing polarized, isn't it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think we're just going to ask you some quick fire round questions.
Go for it.
Yeah.
So, out of all the rowing venues that you've trained at, raced at, or visited, what are some of your favorites and why?
I love Nottingham. I actually love Nottingham.
What, the home pair point? Or
Yeah, home pier point, the actual lake. And the reason is obviously because that's where, like, for my entire career working with juniors, is that's why people get selected to represent GB. And I know people like it looks a bit like it's out of the Cold War. Like, I get it, it's grey, it's brown, like, it looks pretty dirty, right? But the actual, like, that environment, people go there to get selected for Great Britain.
Yeah.
And I think for kids, that's mental. It is also quite like a closed off, close environment. Like, people aren't half a mile. Like Dorney, I mean, I love it. It's so clean, it's fresh, but it's so set apart, and it feels like it's almost like not a community at times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love Nottingham. And is there any other one?
Wimbledon?
Never got there. Got injured. Remember, I was injured too soon.
Lucky escape.
Yeah, maybe.
From what I've heard.
I don't know. I think, but I kind of, But you build stuff there, don't you? Something be pretty sick to go there and like, experience it. And actually, I think, like, to be fair, like, Hereford is actually a pretty amazing place to race.
Nice.
Like, it's a 2K virtually straight. Like, you literally have the cathedral in the background. Like, it's very picturesque.
Mm-hmm.
So those are probably, like, actually, like, top two, probably. But then obviously, to be fair, Dorney's up there, because obviously you get to go and win stuff, don't you? I think taking kids to see the Olympic rings, so, like, when we take kids to, like, junior sailing regatta, like, you take these year 9 kids, and then, like, we'd always do, like, rock up an hour early, take them for a walk, part of the bus down at the Olympic rings, and take them and be like, look, people have won an Olympic gold here. People have set records here. People have changed their lives here. And these 9, like, these year 9s are stood there like, oh my God, this is amazing. And being able to give them that exposure is pretty mint. I guess I love that as a coach.
Mm.
Good answer.
That's wicked. Next question is, if you were to go back in time and repeat one race or one event that you have done when you're 60 or 70, what would it be and why?
Yeah, probably. I probably should say that J16 quad, but it probably
The Henley race.
the Nat schools or one of your umbrellas, but I probably would say like the J14 girls Oxy, because I think that was like the first time that like those girls got real validation that they were good at what they did. Nice. And they were just so proud of themselves, and that was like special. I think probably actually also like qualifying for Henley with that J16 crew, because like we didn't know, so we didn't know if we had to qualify, and actually to qualify was just pretty mental. Because I think never done that as a coach or as an athlete. It's the first time for everything.
Yeah,
that's pretty wild.
Sick. Yeah, qualifiers is a big event.
Yeah.
Like, as a kid, I always used to wonder why anyone's a teacher. Like, why would you do this? There's just screaming kids everywhere. No one's giving a shit. No one's listening. Like this, that, all the rest of it. And then you have an experience like that, and you're like, oh, I get it.
You have like these moments where like, I remember, like these incredible moments where it makes it all worthwhile. Yeah. And it's like winning in that schools, it was obviously massively one, but like finding out. So we watched Caddy, who as a J18 outwins the boys. I watched him win that schools 4 wins the boys, and that was just incredible, because like it was like Leander versus wins are like 2 behemoths of like the junior sculling, And to watch Caddy, who like I actually know personally, go and win that, I was like, oh, that's so sick. Like, that's mental. So I think, there's those moments in it that you look for. Most of the time it's shit. It's cold, it's wet. You stream a kid, they stream back, you hate each other, and then you have those moments where you're like, yeah, this is worth it.
It's every job. That's every job. No one enjoys what they do every day, I don't think. Question I like to ask is, if you could travel back in time to the point at which you fell in love with rowing, what would you say to that kid? What advice would you give them?
Enjoy it more, take it less seriously, but know that you're probably doing the right stuff.
Okay.
I stopped we talked about the fun. Like I wouldn't go and do fun things. I was scared of getting injured. Yeah. And the irony being is I got injured anyway. I might as well have just had fun while doing it.
Yeah. Good advice. Not the first to have given it. And I love asking that question because it gets a lot of the same stuff gets repeated. I want to, maybe when we get to a year, we said we've done 50 episodes. I'm just going to cut all of those out.
Them all together.
Like just listen to some of the best people at what they do tell you what they would have changed.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I wonder what all the top performers say. Like,
yeah, but it's not work harder. It's not stop doing anything else. It's normally we get a lot of
believe in yourself more. Yeah, accept yourself more.
It's okay to do what you want to do. Like you're enough.
I wonder how much of that though is that life advice or just throwing advice? Like, is there a wider spectrum? Be accepting of what you are. Like, you're good at what you do. Like, trust yourself.
Is it? Can you distinguish between the two if your entire life is rowing there?
Well, it's like you said as well. Create good people and you'll make good rowers. So I guess advice for both. Yeah.
So last question, and I'd like you to answer it with two parts: as a rower and as a coach. Who are some of your rowing idols or people you've looked up to during your career?
Yeah, when I was rowing, I think when I got to, so there's a guy called Liam Barford who at Northampton, like he wasn't necessarily like putting a 6-minute erg or anything, but he was just like one of these people that really took me under his wing and helped me. A guy called Chris Radford, who was like I rowed with some masters really early on, and actually was one of the quickest boats, like my most powerful boats I was ever in, and he was just such a nice guy. Who else? And then quite a lot of the guys that were in like the Brooks boats at the time, like when I got to Brooks, like people like Matt Aldridge, I looked up to an awful lot. Like I didn't even have much contact with him because I wasn't rowing very long. He was just a normal guy. And I think just watching those people working so hard, like Aldridge, Stanhope, like clever people like that who are just like literally ripping the rigger off because they bled and died for like Brooks. Like I could get on board with stuff like that. So as a rower, I think it was people like that I watched. But if I'm honest, I didn't know much about rowing when I was a rower. So it was only people I was around locally. And then as a coach, I think first off, I started as like Ryan. And then I think I actually transitioned weirdly into Chris. I think I told you it's the head of rowing. And then I think it's just about finding out things that you don't want really more so. So I think like David Connaughton showed me everything that I didn't like about myself. And he wasn't even doing loads of coaching. He was only coaching year 9, 10. But I think, again, not necessarily these world-class coaches. I think a bit of I had an interview with Jurgen once that he had like a half-hour interview with everyone once a week just to touch base and see how they were as people. I think that was good. And then Sprackler, almost the opposite, didn't say much, but what he did say people listened to. I think trying to find bits like that where what you need for the athlete. But also I think good people make good coaches, right? Well, I mean, some people can be arseholes and be a good coach, but it doesn't tend to work that well that long. So I think people David Connaughton's probably the top one. Yeah.
A lot of the people that you've named, I'd love to get on the podcast. Ryan, Chris, Aldridge, all those types of people. So possibly even David as well. That'd be good. He sounds definitely like an interesting character. I've not heard about him before this conversation, but I'm definitely going to look him up.
Yeah, it's funny because I did the exact same and I was like, why have you not got my job? It's what are you doing? It's this lab technician. And to be fair, fantastic guy. He's the stuff he's done, even at Hereford as a lab technician, is wild. He set up animal clubs and all this stuff, just getting involved just in the exact same way he did in rowing, just pushing it well ahead. And he did the exact same thing in rowing. And what makes me just think is he obviously does that with everything in life.
Yeah, like the thing, if you only ever do what's expected of you, you'll never get any further.
Yeah.
Than these things. If you just do your job title, good luck, you'll never progress anywhere. That's not the way forward.
I feel like the thing I learned from him is that it's not a job, it's a way of life. And I think everything is I do not approach my personal life any different to how I approach rowing. And actually, if anything, I think, as you said, they are one and the same. But at the same time, David taught me that as you say, there's no limit to what you can do. It's not a 40-hour week job. It's the more you commit to it, you might get more out of it. but it might not necessarily all be performance. Like actually, I know I have a lot more fun with the athletes because I'm there more, and therefore we build a better relationship, so therefore we have more trust, and that makes them go faster. But also, you get a laugh and a smile. So at the end of every day, I go home and tell my partner, like, actually some really good stuff that happened, and you have something to talk about over the dinner table, doesn't it? And so actually, like, sometimes I think, that teaching David, like, it's just what you do. I think that's very much like his, if I had to say like his loss, it's just what you do. It's just what I do better. That's what he ever said.
Just completely own it.
I like it. I love it. I always think that the true mark of like a real hero is that they have no idea they are a hero. It's just what I do.
So I nominated David last year for like volunteer coach of the year, and like so did like 20 of our kids at Hereford, and kept it really quiet. And then like a week before, I told David, and behind my back he went and emailed them and said, I don't want to, like, don't. Yeah. And I was like, damn it, because like obviously he doesn't want to be recognised for it. But I think that shows it as well, doesn't it? Because like he was like, I don't deserve it. Like I've not done anything. And I was like, you've transformed, like, trap more. I swear, like I think it was like Partridge, or it might have been Campbell. I can't remember who it was, but he taught loads of people. Opposer. He started people on so many people on their journey. You're like, it must be like 50, 100 people.
That's the imposter syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah, where you'll feel it.
But honestly, it was. I think it may be the opposite with him. He was just comfortable knowing that that's what he'd done, but it didn't need to be recognised by anyone.
Yeah,
I rate that. Like that's genuine, like just calm acceptance. Like I do what I do, but I still go home and he does a sailing boat every weekend. Goes down to Portsmouth, gets on a sailing boat, and lives his best life.
Yeah, exactly. You don't do it for praise and recognition. You just do it because you want to do a good job, because that's who you are as a person. These are your standards, and you just abide by them. Yeah. I could keep the cameras on and continue this conversation for the next 5 hours, because there's just so much to talk about. I've personally really enjoyed and appreciated this episode. Like, it's such a massive inspiration and such a fresh outlook on like a new way of doing things. And I think it's going to be so useful for other people to hear that message as well. And personally, I'm just really excited to see where you're going to be in the next few years and like what you're going to get up to, because you're on our radar for sure.
Well, that's appreciated. I think I do think like, obviously, like I don't think I do anything new or different. I think that's because obviously, to be fair, I don't know what other people do, but what I think is like, I say, if you make good people, we make good athletes, make good rowers, and that's worked so far. We'll find out if it gets all the way to the top or not. But I think it's just fun to, like, make it fun, isn't it? I think it's fun to make it fun. It's like, that's my big one, right? So no, appreciate it to have me on here and actually be able to say all this. Some people probably think it's absolute waffle. Some people think it's gold, but you never know.
If they think it's an absolute waffle, I disagree.
Yeah, I disagree as well. I think it's been great. I think your perspective's really great. I think the situations you've had, having to let go of rowing a little bit early yourself, the mentorship under Headington, then sort of going out on your own in Hereford, but then still finding some mentors. Like, I think it's given you like a really, really interesting outlook. I think different to some of the other stories that we've heard. And I think also what we talked about is useful for anyone in any sport, but certainly in rowing, it's things that is really important as a coach, but also like so much can be learned as an athlete from what you've said. So I think, no, I definitely don't think it's waffle. I think there's going to be some really, really useful stuff in there for everyone.
And I think definitely we're going to have to get you on again at some point to talk about more, and to even like just to delve into a topic and just kind of like discuss. What do you think about the pause at the finish?
I'd love to be on to do that. To be fair, like my background is like biomechanics of rowing. And it's funny because I don't actually talk about rowing that much, even with the athletes. It's more about like how to be a good person, what doing what you do, so you find the best out of it. But yeah, actually, it's funny is that you come onto a rowing podcast and actually we've not really talked about rowing that much, I guess.
Yeah,
that's the secret, isn't it? There's more to it than just that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, how much do you actually want to listen to people talking about pausing at the finish?
No, but I think there's a few people out there.
I would definitely listen to that. Awesome. I think that concludes everything for today's episode. Thanks so much, Ben. And on that note, easy there.
Cue the music.